Chapter 325. Guidai Shichi was in a bad mood. He had been cheated of another 2 million. 2 million. Normally, he could buy a box of that potion for 10,000, but the situation had forced him to do so. Guidai Shichi glared at the cat, only to find that the cat was looking at him suspiciously. Guidai Shichi was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. I just didn't write an IOU, right? With my reputation, are you afraid that I will go back on my word? Wheeze continued to grow suspicious. There were 2 cards under its paws, one with 100,000, and the other with 300,000 or so. Let's round it up and call it 300,000. So, Guidai Shichi, you owe a total of 1,600,000. If you go back on your word, I will let the entire League of Stars know about your debt. Hui Mao said with a serious face. Guidai Shichi felt his wounds open again. He wasn't sure if it was because of his anger. He wiped his face and said to his partner, who was focused on recovering, Swallowtail, if you see these 2 in the future, stay away from them. Swallowtail didn't even bother to look at them. Today, he finally realized that Vanguard had such an outrageous person. In the past, the military thought that hunters were all money-sucking vampires. Swallowtail thought it was only natural, but now that it had happened to him, he had personally experienced the feeling of grinding his teeth. Of course, Guidai Shichi, who had been cheated twice, had experienced it even more. What a scam! Just then, Silin's communicator rang. It was Carrie. Captain, we don't need to go to the rocks. The exotic beasts there are all running out of their caves in fright. It saves us the trouble of chasing them away. Are there a lot of them? Silin asked. Not bad. Enough for us to make a fortune. Carrie seemed very happy. If there are too many of them, just take a step back and do what you can. Got it. After the report, Carrie informed the others. Yudi also gathered everyone. They couldn't be too scattered when dealing with these exotic beasts. They had already made a plan before this, so when Yudi said it, everyone naturally started to move. Each of them rubbed their palms together and prepared to hunt. Money, it was all money that was running towards him. Carrie could already see the shining horn on the head of the exotic beast running at the front. It shone like gold, causing Carrie to almost drool. The horn of this kind of exotic beast had a faint fragrance that could expel pests. It also had a calming effect on the human body. It was very popular among the rich when it was made into ornaments or pendants. Good quality ones could be sold for 5 digits. However, the shells of these exotic beasts were too hard, and they were very fast. They liked to live in groups in rocky areas, and they had violent temperaments. Many hunters had suffered at their hands. Carrie switched the bullets, pulling down the magazine for hunting small beasts and switching it to a magazine specifically for dealing with medium to large armored exotic beasts. Their guns were 2-in-1 so that they could react faster in such a situation. Bang! A bullet accurately shot into the eye of an exotic beast charging at them, exploding right where its eye was. It was just enough to blast the exotic beast's brain into smithereens, but still keep the horn on its head intact. Carrie looked at Tang Qiuqiu not far away. He wasn't the one who fired the shot. While he was still aiming, Tang Qiuqiu fired the first shot, accurate as always. It seemed like Tang Qiuqiu's marksmanship hadn't fallen behind in the past 2 to 3 years. Her standards were still the same. After Tang Qiuqiu fired the first shot, the others opened fire one after another. Meanwhile, Shikai's robot would take the opportunity to cut off the horns of the dead exotic beasts, to prevent the most valuable parts from falling into the hands of others. After the hunt was over, Carrie and the others would return to deal with the exotic beasts they had killed. After all, they didn't have the time to do such delicate work, and the exotic beasts that kept coming at them with their pincers wouldn't give them the chance to do so either. Ba Dao knew that the hunt had officially begun, so he couldn't stay there any longer. Silin had the 3 of them join in the hunt, while he left Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail to watch over them. After all, the 2 of them were in a critical period of recovery. If no one was there to watch over them, it would be very easy for them to be ambushed. Even a small exotic beast could take them out. Is that okay? Let's leave Silin alone, Shusag asked after he left with Ba Dao. Silin is very strong. Plus, with Lord Wheezing around, They should be fine as long as they don't run into a large group, Ba Dao replied. Shu Sag had never seen Silin fight before, and neither had he seen Hui Mao use his claws. He knew that the cat was no ordinary person, but he couldn't imagine just how strong it was. Swallowtail was a little surprised that Silin would stay behind to watch over them, but when he looked at Guidai Shichi, he realized that this was the kind of expression the guy should have when he was in a dungeon, so he wasn't surprised at all. Swallowtail couldn't help but change his opinion of the man who was a lot younger than he was. Plus, Vanguard and Lon Hudi weren't enemies. Hey, Silin, are you still in the 6th division? What's your position now? Guidai Shichi asked. Before Silin could answer, Hui Mao raised his chin and declared cockily, "We're the 11th squad now." The 11th B Squadron? Doesn't Vanguard only have 10 B Squadrons? Guidai Shichi was puzzled. We have 11 now. Silin just built them, Hui Mao said proudly. Why are you so cocky? It's not like you built them, Guidai Shichi taunted. Guidai Shichi thought that Hui Mao would explode in anger, but nothing happened after a while. Hui Mao ignored Guidai Shichi. His attention was drawn to something else. The cat's ears were twitching, and the long hair inside his ears were vibrating as well. Like a radar, they reflected the situation around them. After moving his ears, Hui Mao suddenly said, "Silin." Silin had obviously noticed it as well. The commotion seemed to have spread too far and exceeded Silin's estimation. Noticing Silin and Hui Mao's unusual behavior, Guidai Shichi looked at Swallowtail. Swallowtail was also looking puzzled. Neither of them had noticed anything out of the ordinary. Perhaps it was because of their injuries that their senses had decreased. Silin sensed activity in the distance. It was the direction where Carrie and the others were hunting. However, Silin had a bad feeling about it. Silin had always trusted his instincts, so he immediately contacted Yudi and the others and told Carrie and the others to give up on hunting and return to Vanguard immediately. When they heard Silin's words, although they were a little reluctant to part with the prey in front of them, they immediately retreated according to Silin's orders. What's wrong? Guidai Shichi looked at Silin. Silin didn't answer directly. Instead, he injected Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail with 2 potions. Silin's speed was too fast. Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail had no time to react. Perhaps it was because they had let their guard down in front of Silin that they couldn't stop Silin. Swallowtail was shocked. Even though he had let his guard down, Silin's movements were too fast. Even if he hadn't been injured, he might not have been able to dodge. Without any warning, he couldn't have guessed that Silin would make such a move. Don't worry. It's just a potion to help you recover faster. It's much more expensive than the ones we gave you before. Swallowtail carefully felt his body. The potion really did make him feel a lot better. Even his breathing was a lot smoother. Guidai Shichi's face twitched. What now? Ask for more money? There were 3 consecutive noises. The noises didn't come from this direction. Judging from the distance, they were clearly shaking. Guidai Shichi shuddered. An earthquake? Silin stepped on the trunk of a nearby tree and leaped up to the top. He looked into the distance. A flock of startled birds had already taken to the sky. They were flying in his direction. Silin turned on his communicator and said to Yudi and the others, "Get back here now. Don't fly. Go straight to the forest." At the same time, Silin had Shikai send more robots to the area. He didn't want to be delayed if they ran into a beast horde. Realizing the urgency of the situation, everyone sped up. Silin told Hui Mao to connect to the spaceplane and wait for Carrie and the others to arrive before leaving. Meanwhile, Moon and Sigma were flying toward the city as well after they received word of what had happened. Was that an earthquake just now, Moon? Sigma asked while flying. I don't know. It didn't look like a natural earthquake. Sigma was puzzled. Before coming to this area, he had studied the map. This wasn't an earthquake zone, so why would an earthquake of this magnitude happen? Even when it fired its cannons earlier, it didn't cause such a huge commotion. The group of people rushing toward the spaceplane had to avoid small exotic beasts that were running around in panic every now and then. They also had to avoid trees and bushes in the forest. There were no such obstacles in the air, but Silin had warned them not to run in the air. They couldn't fly even if they were on hoverboards. Therefore, it was really depressing to watch the transport robots fly freely in the air while they had to avoid so many obstacles on the ground. Carrie shot an exotic beast that pounced at him and shouted, "Why are there so many exotic beasts? Did we run into a beast horde?" "It's a beast horde. Why are they all coming this way?" Yudi looked at the growing number of exotic beasts around them. These were the ones that were lucky. They didn't have much attack power, and there were still large exotic beasts chasing after them. No wonder Sillin had told them to retreat. The epicenter of the earthquake had come from 3 different directions in a triangular formation. If they had been any slower, they would have been surrounded by these beasts, and it would have been a lot more dangerous than it was now. Seriously, why is there an earthquake at a time like this? Xiao Shang grumbled. Stop complaining and get back to the space plane. Yudi had just finished saying that to Xiao Shang when he heard 3 pops. One of them was only half a meter away from him, while the other 2 came from Xiao Shang and Carrie. After the 3 pops, 3 people wearing stealth equipment appeared and fell to the ground. All 3 of them had their heads blown off. Shusag was about to react when he saw a person appear in front of him and Tesoro. A slender blade pierced through his neck, and a figure appeared behind him. The person was holding a blade, and the blade was only 10 centimeters away from him. The blade beside Shusag's neck gave off a hair-raising aura as it pierced through the person's forehead. The person in front of him was none other than Sillin. Sillin and Huimao had rushed over as soon as they sensed something was amiss. It was just as he thought. Someone was trying to kill them. Shusag's eyelids twitched uncontrollably. If it weren't for Sillin, either he or Tesoro would have been seriously injured or killed on the spot. These people were just too good at concealment, and the beast stampede had given them the perfect opportunity to conceal their auras. Someone's here. We're under attack. The others reacted quickly. Screech. Shikai released a strong interference electromagnetic signal. This electromagnetic signal could cause the invisibility equipment on those people to malfunction. As a robot maker, he knew stealth equipment all too well, and he carried an anti-stealth device with him out of habit. Thanks to Shikai's interference signal, everyone could see the intruders even without the aid of a device. It wasn't very clear, but it was enough. Snowball, who had always looked like a naive bear, swelled to a height of 5 meters, long fangs protruding, and its eyes changed. Its silver pupils were like a world of ice and snow, cold and cruel, making it look very sinister. Tang Qiuqiu threaded a strap under Snowball's armpit and tied it securely around its shoulder. This way, she could stay on Snowball's shoulder steadily, and at the same time, borrow Snowball's protection to look for opportunities to shoot the figures that appeared due to the interference. Meanwhile, Shueqiu was cleaning up the brainless alien beasts around him. He swung his arm and sent a couple of them flying. Judging from his strength, there was no way they could survive. Shueqiu might look clumsy, but he wasn't slow in the slightest. Even with his speed, Tang Qiuqiu was able to find opportunities to shoot at the intruders. Not only that, she was also able to land a headshot on every one of them. This kind of teamwork was probably something they had done many times before. Their teamwork was excellent, and they reacted quickly to the ambush as well. Shusag was busy taking care of the assassins around him. He had been careless earlier because he didn't pay attention to the beast horde. At the same time, this experience also made him understand that this was a new world with a new set of rules. Since he had decided to lead a wonderful life in this new world with Tesoro, he had to accept the cruelty of this world as soon as possible and integrate into it. This wasn't the Mist Bodhisattva Empire. This was a place where strength mattered the most. Every assassin here had gone through countless life and death battles, so their physical and mental fortitude were far superior to the average person's. Even Shikai's invisible robots couldn't keep up with the assassins' movements once they discovered their targets. Even if they could keep up with the assassins in terms of raw speed, they couldn't do anything about it if their minds couldn't keep up. Therefore, they had to rely on their own strength to solve the problem. Pay attention to Qifeng. Shusag said to Tesoro. Leave the others to me. Pay attention to Qifeng's movements and claws. Shusag had been paying attention to Qifeng since a long time ago. It wasn't because Qifeng wasn't human like them, but because of Qifeng's claws. In battle, Chifeng's claws would always strike from the most precise and effortless angle. It wasn't a deliberate move, but an instinctive one. This was what shocked Shusag the most. Not even he could claim that his claws were better than Chifeng's. Moreover, Chifeng might look small, but even Shusag had no choice but to dodge his explosive power. He hoped that Tesoro could learn something useful from Chifeng. Chifeng aside, Shusag had also paid attention to Tang Qiuqiu. The two kids fought almost entirely on instinct and instinct. What kind of environment did these two children grow up in? Talent? Shusag had always believed that talent was only a decoration. The key was still the person. It was like a blade. No matter how sharp it was, it all depended on who wielded it. Only those who wielded it well wouldn't waste it, and those who didn't know how to use it would only be a waste. Cheto was the only one who fought barehanded. Of course, Shusag and his kind didn't count. Their claws were their own weapons. But Cheto fought barehanded. When Carrie looked over, he just happened to see Cheto twisting the gun barrel of a killer's hand like a fried dough twist and removing the killer's entire arm. There wasn't a single drop of blood on Cheto. This is too fucking violent. Although Shikai's interference was effective, it was only limited to those who wore stealth equipment. There were also some killers who could turn invisible to begin with, so they wouldn't be affected by the electromagnetic interference. Fortunately, there were only a few of them. After Shikai's interference forced the killers to show themselves, Sillin turned his attention to the invisible people and eliminated them first. Ever since the chip inside his body was fully activated, Sillin's constitution had improved by leaps and bounds. It wasn't obvious from the outside, but both his speed and perception were far better than before. Sillin could see the invisible people as well. He couldn't see their complete appearance, only their silhouettes. But that was already a lot better than the others. Sha Ro could see the invisible people because of her special constitution, but her abilities were limited. She couldn't react in time even if she could see them. There was still a huge gap between her and the professional killers. While Sillin was dealing with the killers, he also took care of her. The girl had grown up very quickly. Back in the Mist Bodhisattva Empire, she used to be very restrained. But now, she was becoming more and more open. She had learned a lot of skills from Shusag and Carrie, and every experience was a rare opportunity for her and Tesoro to grow up. Sillin could already imagine what they would be like when they grew up. Bang, bang, bang. Every time a gunshot rang out, an assassin would fall. It might be 1 or 2, or 3 or 4. Yudi and the others weren't the only ones surprised. The killers were just as shocked. It was already shocking enough that they could kill one person with a single gunshot, let alone several. It was a small white gun with a hexagonal muzzle. But to the killers, every gunshot was like a horn calling for their lives. Some assassins wanted to get rid of Celine, the most troublesome opponent, but they realized that they couldn't lock onto Celine at all. They couldn't keep up with Celine's movements either. Celine's speed was too fast, and it was very difficult to make a move on her, be it close combat or ranged combat. Wielding the terrifying white gun in one hand and the thin blade in the other, Sillin kept reaping the lives of the killers. It had been almost 3 years since they last saw each other. This was the first time Carrie and the others saw Sillin fight after Sillin left. Sillin's ability had far exceeded their expectations. Such a person actually didn't join the A-team. If he had joined the A-team, he would definitely have a place there. Hui Mao helped left and right, and when he saw that someone was in a difficult situation, he would go over to help. The speed of his claws was not inferior to Sillin's, and because his body was small and gray, he didn't even make a sound when he ran. 2 killers were caught off guard by Hui Mao's fatal claws. The number of beasts increased. Not only Sillin and the others, but the killers were also affected. Sillin took this opportunity to shoot the remaining killers dead. He turned to Hui Mao and said, "Wheeze, clear the way. Retreat." Sillin didn't dare to let everyone fly in the air, because he wasn't sure if there were any killers or other hunters around who wanted to harm them. To be on the safe side, it was better to retreat through the forest. A loud cry resounded through the forest. The birds in the sky that were approaching them were so startled that they lost their formation. Some of them even changed directions and flew in different directions. Within the forest, The exotic beasts ahead seemed to have encountered something terrifying. They retreated one after another, opening up a path. Some of the exotic beasts directly fainted from the shockwave. Shusag really wanted to cheer for the kitten that was responsible for all of this. How domineering, he thought to himself. Now that the killers were no longer a threat and the alien beasts were no longer a hindrance, everyone was able to retreat a lot faster. At the same time, the spaceplane was also flying toward them. It wasn't until they entered the spaceplane that everyone relaxed a little. However, they didn't dare to be careless. They weren't out of danger yet. Moon, Sigma, bring those two to me, Sillin said through the communicator. After injecting Gidai Shichi and Swallowtail with the antidote, Sillin had rushed to Yudi's side instead of guarding them. If he hadn't, the situation would have been completely different. Moon and Sigma had already arrived at where Gidai Shichi and Swallowtail were, so Sillin ordered them to bring those two to him. Moon and Sigma carried one person each and flew toward the spaceplane. Ghost Butterfly 17 and Swallowtail didn't resist either. Their bodies hadn't fully recovered yet, and their best option was to follow Sillin's group. At the very least, they would be able to survive. Once everyone was present, the spaceplane flew away from the hunting planet. Carrie and the others couldn't help but feel sorry for the animals that they hadn't killed yet. At this point, Shueqiu had returned to his harmless self and was rolling around with the Miantuan without the slightest hint of nervousness. Two slow-witted bastards. Only after the spaceplane left the planet and entered the starship did everyone finally relax. The soreness in their muscles intensified. However, Carrie and the others ignored the soreness and ran to the spaceplane's transport container to clean up the meat and the alien beast's horns. Meanwhile, Sigma and Moon went to Swallowtail's little orchard to deal with the seeds. Sillin called Yudi and brought Gidai Shichi and Swallowtail to a meeting room on the starship. Sillin looked at Gidai Shichi and Swallowtail and asked, "Tell me, which side are they on?" Chapter 326. Hearing Sillin's question, Gidai Shichi frowned. "Who?" Sillin glanced at the other side. Keep pretending, keep pretending. That earthquake was obviously man-made. We weren't in a seismic zone, but there was an earthquake, and it happened while we were hunting. It was a three-way earthquake, and it forced the beasts to one side. This is a beast horde that wants to kill us, or take advantage of the chaos to kill us. Those killers were provoked by you, weren't they? Gidai Shichi and Swallowtail glanced at each other. They both saw the confusion in each other's eyes. They weren't faking it. They really hadn't expected it. You mean, those people tried to kill you? Gidai Shichi asked tentatively. Seeing the expressions on Gidai Shichi and Swallowtail's faces, Sillin and Yudi were also surprised. Yes, they tried to kill us, Sillin said with certainty. Could it be that they wanted to kill someone on your team? Gidai Shichi asked again. Sillin thinks about the situation. The first to be attacked were Yudi, Carrie, and Xiaoshang. They were all old members of the 6th Division, so it was possible. But... Or maybe we were on their hit list. Yudi, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke up. Gidai Shichi and Swallowtail frowned even harder. They had an idea, but they couldn't confirm it. All right, stop beating around the bush. Who were those killers? Sillin asked. Swallowtail looked up at Sillin. How do you know they were killers and not other hunters? Professional killers have a different aura than professional hunters. Sillin had met many professional killers before, so he was very sensitive to the aura they exuded. That was why he was able to sense the killer's presence. At the time, Yudi and the others were in the forest. If they had flown into the sky, they would have become live targets for the killers. At least they had some cover in the forest. You're right. They're from the Hades organization. On the list of killers, only Pluto likes to assassinate invisibly, Gidai Shichi answered. Pluto? In the Star Alliance's assassin ranking, the Netherworld King assassin organization was ranked in the top 5. Furthermore, its ranking had soared in the past 2 years, and it was even able to charge into the top 3. It was very difficult to estimate the gap between the top 3 assassin organizations. Thus, the Netherworld King could be considered an upstart among the assassin organizations, and its reputation in the Star Alliance was very resounding. Ghost Butterfly 17 continued, Hades has formed an alliance with Heaven's Birth. As you all know, Hell is a place where everyone has to work together to survive. That's why the assassin organizations have started to form alliances. When other hunter groups joined smaller groups, Heaven's Birth, One, Heaven, and God, Heaven's Birth not only recruited smaller hunter groups, but also hooked up with Pluto. That's not the big deal. What's important is that Heaven's Birth and Lon Hudi don't get along. They've already had a few conflicts. At this point, Gadai Shichi helplessly pointed at himself and Swallowtail, who was sitting beside him with a solemn expression. We were originally a small team, but we had a conflict with Heaven's Birth. After Pluto's people joined us, our situation became more and more difficult, so we split up and left. Those killers were probably the group that chased after us. However, after Swallowtail and I left in the aircraft, we found that the aircraft had malfunctioned. We landed on this planet, abandoned the aircraft, and planned to hide and heal while waiting for reinforcements. We didn't expect that there would be so many difficult exotic beasts when we landed, and they made us even more injured. After that, we met your team members. You know what happened next. Lon Hudi's individual strength was strong, but with Heaven's Birth and Pluto working together, it would be difficult for Lon Hudi's small team to resist their combined attack. As for why Pluto's people wanted to kill you, that's what I'm curious about. Their actions showed that they were already going against Lon Hudi, so why would they want to kill you? If you were someone they didn't know, they wouldn't have attacked. But obviously, they must have recognized that you were from Vanguard. They caused the chaos in the beast horde to force us out and kill you at the same time. Offending two of the big four at the same time, what were they thinking? Were they fearless? I really don't understand. Gadai Shichi spread his hands. Gadai Shichi and Swallowtail didn't understand, and neither did Sillin and Yudi. Although they weren't part of the A-team, they were still the hunters of Vanguard. Pluto's people actually killed them as soon as they arrived, not leaving any room for negotiation. Yudi shuddered at the thought of the situation. If it wasn't for Sillin's appearance, he might have been seriously injured or even gone to see his ancestors. After all, the information he received was too little. Plus, he had left the League of Stars for almost 3 years. Many things had happened in these 3 years, and even now, Sillin couldn't think of a reason. Do you have any information on Fog and Wuxia? Sillin asked. There's nothing we can do. The assassin organizations on the assassin leaderboard are forming alliances, but the two giants outside the leaderboard are excluded. Why would they need to form an alliance? Even if they formed an alliance, they would only look for people at the level of Azrael, right? Or directly form an alliance with some of the core members of the Big Four hunter groups. I can't get any information on people at that level. He wouldn't get as much information as he needed even if he kept asking, so Sillin gestured for the two of them to leave. Gadai Shichi stood up and took 2 steps towards the door, then stopped and turned to look at Sillin. I want to ask, are the assassins that Pluto sent after us still in the forest of that hunting planet? Celine looked at him calmly. He's dead. Gadai Shichi and Swallowtail were speechless. In fact, they were prepared to join forces with the reinforcements from Lon Hudi's hunter group to take revenge after receiving news of the assassins that Pluto had sent after them. Who knew that Sillin's words would make them choke on their words? They're all dead. There were at least 30 assassins in the group that came after them, right? I don't know. Sillin thought for a moment. More than 30 died. I don't know if there are any left. Gadai Shichi's face twitched. He turned around and walked out the door. I'll have Whis give you the bill, Sillin added. Gadai Shichi, who had just walked out of the door, stumbled when he heard this. He knew that Sillin wouldn't ask for nothing after bringing them here and injecting them with high-quality medicine. He hated bills the most. How despicable! After Gadai Shichi and Swallowtail left the meeting room, the two of them whispered to each other. Why haven't I heard of such a character in Vanguard before? More than 30 assassins from Pluto were all killed, and this group of people didn't seem to be seriously injured. Other than some fatigue, they didn't seem to be injured at all, Swallowtail said. Gadai Shichi was also at a loss. His understanding of the Vanguard B squadrons was limited to a small number of people, and they were all at least at the rank of lieutenant commander. It was a complete coincidence that he had met Sillin back then. As for the people in the B squadrons, he knew even less about them. In Gui Daishichi's mind, the people in the B squadrons didn't need to pay attention to them. But this time, the people in this squad had completely overturned his understanding. What kind of people are they? This kind of combat power was more than enough to occupy a spot in the A squadron. The two of them didn't walk far before they saw Shusag squatting in a corner and smoking. Gui Daishichi ran over. Shusag was reflecting on his encounter with the assassins. This was the first time he had encountered a team of assassins other than the one sent by that minor noble family to hunt him down. Moreover, the assassins here were much more difficult to deal with than the ones he had encountered back then. What surprised Shusag the most was that Sillin had told him that these assassins were average at best. If an average assassin was enough to nearly kill him, then what about the stronger assassins Sillin mentioned? Wouldn't he be slaughtered if he ran into them? This won't do. I need to train harder. While Shusag was thinking about how to improve his strength, he saw Gui Daishichi walking toward him. Hey bro, how many people are in your B squadron? Shusag blew out a ring of smoke. The fact that the kid called him bro instead of uncle made him feel a lot better. Haven't you seen almost all of our team members? Gui Daishichi opened his mouth, but in the end he let out a dry chuckle and walked toward the lounge Sillin had arranged for them with Swallowtail. Say, Swallowtail, do you think our Lon Hudi is really the strongest among the 4 great hunter regiments? Swallowtail thought for a moment before answering, we used to be. In other words, he wasn't sure now, and he couldn't be sure in the future either. While Gui Daishichi and Swallowtail were surprised to learn that these seemingly unreliable people had slaughtered more than 30 Hades assassins, they also felt relieved. If this squad really was the same size as the other B squadrons in Vanguard, and every member of this squad was as strong as they were, then the 4 great hunter regiments would probably no longer be the 4 great hunter regiments. After Gui Daishichi and Swallowtail left, Sillin and Yudi were exchanging their opinions when Beaver told Sillin that he had received a call from the A squadron. Sillin told him to transfer the call to them directly. A light screen popped up on the conference table in front of Sillin and Carrie. After the call was transferred, a familiar face appeared on the screen. He wore a big black hat that covered almost half of his face, and the sharp eyes under the hat were always enough to make people stop in their tracks. Senior Songba Leruo, Sillin called out. It was still the same expressionless face, but there was a hint of seriousness in his eyes. Sillin, the main reason I'm contacting you this time is to inform you of one thing. Not long ago, the 7th B Squadron suffered a joint attack from the Heaven's Birth Hunter Regiments and the Hades Assassin Organization. They suffered great losses, and if the 3rd B Squadron hadn't arrived in time to rescue them, the entire 7th B Squadron would have had to rebuild itself. Sillin and Yudi shuddered when they heard this. It was that serious? Normally, a B Squadron would only be brought up when more than half of the B Squadron had died. If that was the case, then the 7th B Squadron had suffered great losses. Right now, the relationship between Heaven's Birth and Vanguard is very tense. You must be careful if you encounter Heaven's Birth. Songba Leruo said. I know. We've actually run into a group of assassins already. Sillin told Songba Leruo about the previous incident. Anyway, you must be careful. The situation is unclear right now, and you can't trust anyone completely. Also, the higher-ups have decided to hold a meeting 50 days from now, and all B Squadron commanders and vice commanders must attend. Alright, we understand. After the conversation with Songba Leruo, Sillin thought that he could contact Moon, but he discovered that he couldn't get in touch with him at all. They were on the same starship, and yet he couldn't get in touch with Moon at all? After failing to get in touch with Moon, Sillin decided to contact Sigma instead. Right now, Sigma was busy working in its indoor orchard. It had discovered a lot of good seedlings on the hunting planet this time, and it wasn't planning to use genetic engineering to improve them. It preferred naturally occurring species. After Sillin contacted Sigma, the first thing he asked was about the orchard. It was a blessing to be able to eat fresh fruits during a space voyage, And the answer he got from Sigma was very satisfactory. Sigma was indeed skilled. It was only after learning about the orchard that Sillin asked, "Do you know what happened to you? I can't get in touch with him." Moon said that he's tired and wants to rest. "He told us not to disturb him," Sigma replied. Tired? A robot that could work for a long time just by absorbing light energy was saying that he was tired? Bullshit. But before Sillin could ask any further, the light screen on the conference table started flashing. All kinds of data and strings of characters were jumping rapidly, and every electronic device in the conference room started malfunctioning. In the game room on the starship, Tang Qiuqiu was fighting Carrie in a one-on-one shootout, and Shueqiu accidentally bumped into Tang Qiuqiu while playing with Qifeng, causing Tang Qiuqiu to make a serious mistake. Carrie took advantage of the situation and started yelling about turning the tables. Just when Carrie was about to turn the tables, the game system suddenly froze. Carrie was having a great time playing the game, and the spectators were also getting excited. Everyone knew that something like this would happen. At the same time as the conference room Sillin was in, all the electronic devices in the game room started malfunctioning, and the lights in the room started flashing more and more frequently. Everyone's first reaction, "Shit, the system crashed at this critical moment." Their second reaction, "Enemy attack." Dias's 2-year-old son Locke was rolling around with Shueqiu and the others. When he saw the situation, the little guy's eyes widened in curiosity, and he let out a squeal. "Huh!" Before he could finish his squeal, Shueqiu grabbed him by the straps on his back and carried him in his arms, just in case something happened and he couldn't react in time. What happened? Enemy attack? Or did we encounter an ion storm? Carrie and the others rushed out of the game room and ran to the command room. Unlike everyone else, Hui Mao was squatting on the tea table, lazily eating a bag of fish biscuits, oblivious to everything else. Seeing Carrie and the others panic, Hui Mao only flicked his ears and continued to lie there calmly eating fish biscuits with squinted eyes. When Carrie rushed to the command room, he saw Sillin coming out of the conference room, but Sillin ignored Carrie and the others. He just told them not to panic and quickly left. "What's wrong?" Gaidai Shichi and Swallowtail asked the others after they came out of the starship due to the various anomalies. They thought that their pursuers had arrived. "I don't know, but the captain said not to panic. We should go back to what we were supposed to do," Carrie answered. Ignoring everyone's speculations, Sillin went straight to Moon and Sigma's lounge. He pressed the doorbell but no response. He pressed the doorbell again, but still no response. "What are you doing, Moon?" Sillin said in mechanical language. After a long time, the door to the lounge opened. Moon tilted his head and said innocently, "I'm thinking." Sillin said, "What kind of deep thinking are you thinking about?" Sillin didn't finish his sentence. The second half of his sentence was, "Do you know that half of the starship's instruments and electronic equipment can't be used?" Chapter 327. Something was wrong with Moon ever since he returned. Earlier, Sillin hadn't asked him about it because he was busy dealing with Gaidai Shichi and Swallowtail. They had only delayed for a short period of time, and in the end, this guy had caused such a situation. For robots like Moon, Sigma, and Cheto, the changes in their consciousness would produce a kind of interference. Normally, they would try to suppress the interference, but it was obvious that Moon was too absorbed in his thoughts to do so. Therefore, the interference started spreading from Moon's room to the rest of the world through the communication network and electrical circuits. That was how the phenomenon he had just seen was caused. It was the same as when Hui Mao and Sillin passed through the space-time vortex and released the machine language radiation that caused Sigma's machines to go on strike. Shikai called it machine mind invasion. It was a hurdle that many robot researchers had to face. If they handled it well, they would gain a great deal of help, but if they didn't, they would suffer a backlash. Be it the League of Stars or the Mist Bodhisattva Empire, there had been a lot of robot betrayals that caused a backlash. "What's wrong, Moon?" Sillin walked into the room, pulled out a chair and sat down across from Moon. Moon lowered his head and twirled his fingers. He looked like he couldn't bring himself to say it. After a long time of dawdling, Sillin finally understood why Moon was throwing a tantrum. Moon had fired a couple of cannons while he and Sigma were searching for the seeds. Now that he thought about it for a moment, he realized that the assassins must have used his cannons to cause a ruckus in the beast hordes and come up with a plan to trigger a three-sided earthquake. That was why Moon felt very guilty. He was the one who didn't think things through. Thankfully, there were no casualties this time, or he would have felt guilty for a very long time. That was why Moon had gone into self-reflection ever since he returned. He was so absorbed in his own self-reflection that he caused a lot of the starship's instruments and electronics to malfunction. Now that he knew that he had caused trouble again, he felt even more ashamed than before. That was why he stood in front of Sillin with his head lowered. Sillin looked at the original robot in front of him. Aside from the fact that it looked like a robot, it had the same personality and thought process as a human. It would be proud, throw a tantrum, and feel guilty. The fact that he felt guilty meant that he actually valued the people in the team very much. He had already approved of the people in the team. Those who were not approved would be separated from his own world, and he wouldn't care whether they lived or died. Sillin was quite pleased to see you like this. At least this was a good sign, wasn't it? Sillin raised his hand and placed it on Moon's round head. He rubbed it like he was rubbing Hui Mao, feeling the cold, hard metal under his hand. It's not your fault. Even if it wasn't for you, they would still have caused such trouble. You did a good job. When it's time to shock them, you should shock them and teach them a lesson. Otherwise, they'll think that you're easy to bully and become even more aggressive. But those killers still found an opportunity. You said in a low voice. You just happened to be at that point. This is the League of Stars, not the Mist Bodhisattva Empire. Do you know the rules of survival here? Strength reigns supreme. That's right. Strength reigns supreme, even if some things are unavoidable. Even if you hadn't fired the cannons, other hunters would have done the same. Think about it. What would have happened if you hadn't fired the cannons? They will take the initiative to attack, and the commotion caused by their attacks might not be smaller than the commotion caused by your cannons. You thought back to the situation. It was true that he had attacked the hunters hiding in the forest because he sensed that they were up to no good. If he hadn't attacked them, there was no telling what the hunters would have done. So don't think too much into it. Some things are unavoidable, and we can only face them head-on. Sillin didn't say anything more. It would be counterproductive to say too much. Sillin wasn't worried at all. Naturally, he could understand more with Moon's way of thinking. Of course, if it were Sigma, Sillin wouldn't have said all of this. If Sigma was this conflicted, it would probably be the first robot to crash due to depression if he didn't get rid of its guilt. Moon fell silent for a moment. The blue bands on his face flickered as he pondered. He had withdrawn the interference waves, so they weren't affecting him. Sillin wasn't in a hurry. He sat quietly and waited for Moon to come to a decision. 30 minutes later, the blue bands on Moon's face narrowed. Sillin knew that Moon had returned to normal. Go help Sigma organize the seeds. It's busy by itself. Sillin flicked Moon's head with a smile, just like how he flicked Hui Mao. Alright, I'm going. Don't forget to close the door when you leave. Then, Moon flew toward Sigma's indoor orchard. When Sillin came out, he saw Shikai leaning against the wall with a conflicted look on his face. What's wrong? Sillin asked. That little guy actually said hi to me when he flew past. That's strange. He usually ignores me. That's good. Shikai still didn't understand why Moon changed his attitude so quickly. Hey, Sillin, what's going on with Moon? I don't know how Moon's mind works. Don't your family have a lot of records about him? You should know more about him. Shikai curled his lips. It was precisely because of what his ancestors had done that Moon had been wary of him. Most of what he knew about Moon came from Chip. Hey, Sillin, don't go yet. Shikai hurriedly stopped Sillin. I have something to discuss with you. What is it? Sillin stopped and looked at Shikai. About this starship. Yu's incident gave me an idea. Shikai explained his idea to Sillin. Moon's incident had revealed a lot of problems with the starship. Although most starships were like this, it was far from enough for Shikai, who had always had high standards. If Moon had affected the starship's machinery to such an extent just by thinking about it, It would be troublesome if something similar happened again, or if it was the enemy who released the interference. You know that Cheto and Sigma weren't affected at all when the starship's machinery was affected, Sillin. This means that they have a strong defense against this kind of interference. If Cheto and Sigma are exceptions, then take my robots as an example. They were affected by the interference, but it wasn't to a degree where their functions were disabled or their programs messed up. At most, their reactions were slightly delayed. That's all. So, I'm saying that we should modify the starship in that direction. Sillin didn't say anything. It wasn't that he didn't agree with Shikai's idea. He was just thinking about the super AI veg fritter he built a long time ago. Back when he was building the veg fritter, he had already thought about modifying the starship in that direction. It was just that he hadn't gotten the chance to do so until now. The 11th Squad's starship wasn't developed in that direction due to the lack of time. Although they hadn't completed a super AI starship, they did leave room for modification in that direction. Right now, the starship could only be considered a normal AI model. It was about the same as Vanguard's other B Squadron starships, but there was a lot of risk involved in modifying it in that direction. After all, a starship wasn't a flying car that could jump out if something went wrong, but a starship's AI could simply throw them into space and kill them. Shikai understood Sillin's concerns, but he really wanted to give it a try. The problem was that not everyone could afford it. Come up with a plan first, and we'll work on it together. By we, Sillin included Moon, Sigma, Cheto, and Huimao. They were the ones who understood the super AI better than anyone else, so their chances of success would be much higher. All right, I'll come up with a plan as soon as I can. Shikai was very happy to receive permission. This was going to be a huge challenge. Back then, his ancestors were able to modify Chip into a super AI that could control an electronic star. He was confident that he could do the same thing. Shikai's original plan was to improve the robots, but after encountering Pluto's assassins, he realized that the new batch of robots had many shortcomings. Perhaps it was due to material limitations, but these robots were not like the ones that Black Viper used on missions. Every robot that Black Viper used on missions was expensive, and all the materials were expensive, but at the time, he did not care about money. Things were different now. Shikai had saved a lot of money, and it wasn't obvious under normal circumstances. But when it came to critical moments, its speed, reflexes, and detection abilities weren't up to Shikai's standards. After he returned, he discussed with Cheto how to improve the robots and how to build better robots while lowering the cost. Obviously, this matter had to be delayed. Shikai couldn't care less about anything else until he had the plan to embed the super AI into the starship. When Sillin returned to the command center, he was still thinking about how to embed the super AI into the starship. If it succeeded, it would be a great help to him, but if it failed, it would be a bomb that could be placed around him at any time. Sillin would rather destroy it than keep it around. Sillin suddenly heard a strange sound while he was deep in thought. He turned around and saw the gray cat rubbing its back on the table. The sound was made by the gray cat rubbing its back on the table. Is it because his back is itching? Are you lice? Or are you infected with fleas? You didn't catch those things while you were hunting, did you? Sillin walked over and asked. No. Huimao twisted his back left and right on the table. His chubby body looked very comical. Come here, let me take a look. Sillin beckoned him over. Huimao immediately kicked his hind legs and crawled in front of Sillin. Sillin scooped Huimao up and scratched his back a few times. However, Sillin immediately noticed a problem. There were two protrusions on Huimao's back. They looked like bones and they were long and oval in shape. Although they weren't very obvious because of the fur covering them, Cheto could still feel them with his touch. What's going on? Sillin poked the two protrusions on Huimao's back. Yes, that's it. It's really itchy. Huimao cried. Carrie was walking past the door with a glass of fruit juice when he saw Huimao's reaction. That was why he came over and asked about it. After listening to Sillin's explanation, Carrie reached out to feel Huimao's back. Feeling the two protrusions, Carrie exclaimed, you have bone hyperplasia. Slap. As soon as Carrie said this, Tico slapped him on the face. Don't talk nonsense if you don't know anything. That's two different things. Read more medical books and don't make a fool of yourself. Carrie rubbed his head and pursed his lips. He took a step back and let Tico see what was wrong with Huimao. After many tests, Tico couldn't figure it out. Although she wasn't a veterinarian, she knew about the health problems of pets because of her rabbit. She really couldn't understand Huimao's problem. Every test was very different from that of a normal cat. She didn't know what standard to use to identify it. As for the bones, the two protrusions didn't cause any discomfort to the other bones. It's not itchy anymore. Huimao turned over and stood up, shaking his fur. He picked up the unfinished fish biscuits not far away and continued to eat. Could it be because he ate too much? Huru is much fatter than before, Carrie muttered. Sillin shook his head. Let's wait and see. This guy can't be judged by common sense. In fact, the itch on Huimao's back was only intermittent. Apart from the itch, Huimao didn't have any other symptoms. After the itch passed, he would return to normal and was still alive and kicking. He quickly opened the fish biscuits. Sillin had specially prepared a back cushion for Huimao so that it didn't need to lie down when it wanted to rub against the cushion. However, Huimao's appetite had increased a lot recently and he ate almost non-stop. The results of the hunting on the hunting planet had been checked. Sillin wanted to sell them for some supplies first instead of saving all the money. In such a chaotic situation, it was only reliable to exchange money for supplies. Otherwise, in a crisis, they might not be able to get what they wanted even if they had the money. Diaz and the others knew the contact information of some of their old customers. They used to sell their items to them after hunting. These people specialized in purchasing items in the hunting star zone, and their prices were fair. Many hunter regiments liked to trade with them. After contacting the buyer and the trading location, Sillin told Gidai Shichi to contact Lon Hudi's people to pick him up at the location. Remember to return the money by the way, said Huimao, who was lying on the ground eating a fish biscuit. Gidai Shichi threw a nut at him. Eat your biscuit, fatty. The trading planet was a relatively remote area in the entire hunting star zone, but it was in such an area that almost 60% of the goods in the hunting star zone were traded from here. The people who came to deliver the goods were undoubtedly not large hunter groups. Since the chaos of the League of Stars began, this place was obviously much quieter. There were only a few starships and spaceships docked at the spaceport outside the planet. There are no starships from Heaven's birth. Should we dock the starship at the spaceport or park it somewhere else invisibly? Carrie asked. Invisibly. We'll take the spaceship over to do the trade, said Sillin. After finding a place to hide the starship, Sillin and the others split into 3 groups and took the spaceship to the trading planet. Because they had informed in advance, Sillin and the others flew directly to the trading location. It was a vast manor, with tamed exotic beasts in the surroundings. The exotic beasts that people spent so much effort to tame all had their own selling points. Those people were just maximizing their value. There was no need to take the initiative to contact them. There were already people coming out from the manor to meet them. Sillin left this series of matters to Diaz. After all, he was a veteran and familiar with the other party. While the other party was inspecting the goods, Sillin looked at the surrounding scenery. There were some buildings and breeding grounds for exotic beasts on the vast grassland that was filled with the scent of grass. The exotic beasts that were once fierce on the hunting star were now leisurely strolling on the grass, enjoying a comfortable life. Sillin felt that they were a group of hedgehogs that had been plucked out of their quills. Huimao, Shueqiu, and the others were rolling on the grass. Tico put the little rabbit down to eat the grass. The quality of the grass here was very good, fresh, and not contaminated by drugs. Sillin was looking at it when he suddenly noticed people walking out of a building in the distance. Although they were quite far away, Sillin could still see them clearly without the help of any tools. The bodyguards were protecting 2 young men, and one of them was someone Sillin had met once before, Fenyuzwa. Behind Fenyuzwa was the famous business-related media giant of the League of Stars, Lux, which had over 80 contribution points. Since they mainly reported on the business sector, Sillin had only met him once at a small gathering held by Lung when God's back garden at the center of Sector Z was first opened by the military. However, Finyuzwa probably wouldn't be able to recognize Silin even if he stood in front of Silin. After all, they had only met once, and Silin had changed his appearance. Moreover, it was Lung who had pulled the strings for him. Finyuzwa probably didn't think much of Silin at the time. However, with Finyuzwa's identity as the young master of Lux, he chatted happily with the person next to him without putting on any airs of superiority. Silin knew that this wasn't to say that Finyuzwa didn't put on airs. If it was someone of lower status, Finyuzwa would definitely put on airs. However, the fact that he didn't put on such an attitude meant that the other person's background was pretty big. The young man gave Silin a sense of familiarity even though he had never seen him before. The young man looked a little thin and weak, and Silin could tell from his walking movements that he wasn't very strong. The young man's bodyguards were all experts, and no matter where the young man went, the bodyguards would always be able to protect him from the best angle possible. The young man wasn't very strong, but his senses were very sharp. When he noticed that someone was staring at him, he looked towards Silin. However, he moved his gaze away after a single glance. The bodyguards around him were very wary of Silin, and they were paying attention to Silin's situation at all times. Strange, have I really never seen that person before? Why does he feel so familiar? It was at this moment he heard Yudi's shout. Silin shook his head and walked towards the direction. However, he had only taken 2 steps when Silin suddenly paused and widened his eyes. That person. Chapter 328. Silin. It's Silin. Yudi waved his hand in front of Silin's eyes when he noticed that Silin wasn't responding to him. What is it? Silin asked, but his eyes were focused on the people standing in front of the building. Do you know them? Yudi asked. Silin shook his head. I only know one of them. I don't know the other. Do you know who the man in the brown windbreaker is? I don't know. I've never seen him before. Who's the guy next to him? The young master of Lavish, Finyuzwa. Oh, a rich young master? He's rich. Speaking of which, a man who can chat so happily with the young master can't be simple, can he? Silin shot a glance at the tamed alien beasts rolling around on the grass and teasing them. He shook his head and decided not to count on them. Cheto, help me investigate that man, Silin said to Cheto in secret. The reason why Silin found the man familiar wasn't because he had seen him before. It was because the man's facial features reminded Silin of Genya. It made Silin think that he was Genya. Silin had seen Genya's image when he was young back at the Gen family's residence. Genya at the time looked a little like this man. There were a lot of people in the League of Stars who looked exactly the same as Genya. Although the man didn't look very similar to Genya, and even if they were related by blood, Silin felt that there was something special about him. Silin believed that it wasn't an illusion or a misreading of his face. It was because of Silin's intuition, and Silin always trusted his intuition. Silin would find a way to obtain the man's DNA for verification. If Silin was right, then he would be able to deliver Genya's item to the League of Stars very soon. Finyuzwa asked the person next to him, Xingfu, do you know that guy? The man called Xingfu looked at Silin's direction and said, How the hell would I know them? You know that I've never left Sector S before, and I'm surrounded by bodyguards all the time. I don't even have any privacy. That's strange. Finyuzwa took the warm tea from the servant and called over a bodyguard behind him. Investigate the people over there. Yes. After receiving the order, the bodyguard silently retreated. Finyuzwa usually drank wine. In Finyuzwa's knowledge, this kind of warm tea had always been liked by middle-aged and elderly people, so Finyuzwa disdained to touch this thing. However, the person beside him was a little special, so Finyuzwa drank with him. He even put on a satisfied expression as if he was tasting the tea. Come on, if you don't want to drink this, then don't. Xingfu took another cup of tea from the servant and took a sip with a frown. Then, he said, if it wasn't for my constitution, I wouldn't have fucking drunk this thing. Ahem, did your father forbid you from undergoing surgery and genetic medicine? Finyuzwa asked curiously. Considering their background and wealth, there was no way they couldn't even perform a simple surgery. Besides, even if Xingfu's genes were crap, they shouldn't be so crap that he couldn't even endure a surgery, right? Xingfu shot him a glance and said, "My grandmother forbade it." Realization dawned on Fan Yuzhua. Ah, so it's the queen's decision. No wonder. If it wasn't for my grandmother, we would have been like everyone else a long time ago. At the very least, we'd be able to run and fight like a normal person, instead of doing girly things all day long like a cripple. They're drinking wine, and we're drinking warm tea, no less. Aren't they afraid that I'll go soft from drinking this thing? The bodyguards behind Xingfu looked like they were deaf, and they couldn't help but feel embarrassed. One of them, who was probably the head of the bodyguards, cleared his throat and reminded his young master of the situation. However, the young master pretended not to notice and continued venting his dissatisfaction. What do you think happened? My grandmother is a domineering person. She's resourceful and bold, or she wouldn't have been called the queen. Why would she allow us to be trash like this? Xingfu continued. Fan Yuzhua hurriedly covered it up with the excuse of drinking tea. The man could criticize the queen, but he didn't dare. Setting aside whether the queen would do anything about it, his old man wouldn't let him off the hook for sure. Why didn't she call him Her Majesty instead of Her Majesty? It was because the queen was just a title someone else had given her. There might be a lot of people in the League of Stars who hadn't heard of the name Queen before, but ever since the chaos began, more and more people had learned of the name. Everyone knew that the Queen referred to the one in Sector S. She was the leader of one of the three great forces of Sector S, Golden Beginning, and the Queen, Exen Engenia. Ever since the League of Stars chaos ended, a power struggle had broken out in Sector S, and in the end, only three great forces were left: Flying Snake, Fire Phoenix, and Golden Beginning. Queen Exen Engenia was the ruler of Golden Beginning. Fan Yuzhua wouldn't have cared so much about Xingfu's feelings if he was just the grandson of the queen of Sector S. Some of Fan Yuzhua's friends were dissatisfied with Xingfu's politeness, but Fan Yuzhua simply smiled and said nothing. Everyone knew that Xingfu was the queen's grandson, but there was one thing they didn't know. Xingfu's aunt was Exen Prisa, the only huntress of the 6 stars of Hunt. Every star-rank hunter had powerful connections, and even Osculos, the loneliest of them all, had a lot of forces behind him. That was why his death caused such a huge commotion. Exen Prisa had connections with the military, the government, the hunter regiments, and some of the big families. Her connections were something that Fan Yuzhua had to be wary of. It was why Fan Yuzhua had always been so considerate of Xingfu. Xingfu was still complaining to himself and ignoring the awkwardness of the people around him. It wasn't a good thing to listen to the queen speak ill of him, and there was no telling when trouble would come knocking on his door. While Fan Yuzhua was trying to figure out how to respond, the bodyguard he had ordered to investigate Silin's group walked up to him quietly. "Young master, those people are hunters from Vanguard's 11th B Squadron. They're here to trade their goods." Vanguard? 11th B Squadron? Xingfu wasn't the one who asked the question, but Fan Yuzhua himself. He might not be strong, but his hearing was pretty good, and Fan Yuzhua wasn't planning to hide anything from him. The bodyguard didn't lower his voice, so Xingfu heard everything the bodyguard said. Although he wasn't familiar with the situation outside of Sector S, Xingfu still knew some basic information about the 4 great hunter regiments. He knew that Vanguard had 10 B squadrons, but since when did they have an 11th B squadron? Fan Yuzhua had the same question on his mind, so the bodyguard hurriedly explained, "It's a new group, so there aren't many of them." Seeing that the bodyguard was hesitant to speak, Fan Yuzhua got angry. "If you have something to say, just say it." "Well, I've looked into it. The person who received the goods gave me a list of the members of the 11th Division. Among them is the name young Master Lung is looking for." Cough cough. Cough cough cough. Fan Yuzhua was so agitated that he choked and his face turned red. Xingfu patted Fan Yuzhua's back. Calm down, calm down. Calm my ass." Fan Yuzhua roared in his heart. "You're talking about Tham? Silin?" Fan Yuzhua asked hurriedly. The bodyguard nodded. "I've checked on the other members of the 11th Division. Quite a few of them used to be from the 6th Division, But the problem is that Silin doesn't look like what Lung showed us. After catching his breath, Fenuzwa took a few deep breaths and turned to look at Silin's group. However, Silin had already been dragged away by Yudi to discuss the deal, so Fenuzwa couldn't see Silin's figure from where he was. Not long after the League of Stars descended into chaos, young Master Lung contacted a few of his friends in various fields to search for the person named Silin. However, there had been no news since then. Not even Vanguard's 6th Division members knew about it. How could Fenuzwa not be excited when he suddenly heard news about Silin? It wasn't because he was close to Silin, but because of young Master Lung. If this matter was confirmed, Fenuzwa was certain that young Master Lung would help him solve the difficult test his father gave him not long ago. "Young Master, should we continue the investigation?" the bodyguard asked. "Of course. It's most likely him." "Should we contact young Master Lung then?" "Not right now. Let's wait until I confirm it. Have the person in charge of the goods stall them." "Understood." Fenuzwa suddenly remembered something and called out to the bodyguard who was about to leave. "See if the cat young Master Lung mentioned is here. If it's here, then it's Silin." "Got it." After the bodyguard left, Fenuzwa finally remembered that he had been too focused on Silin and neglected Xingfu. He was about to apologize when Xingfu spoke up first. "Silin? That name sounds familiar. I think I've heard it somewhere before." Fenuzwa thought for a moment and smiled. "Oh, I forgot to tell you. Silin is acquainted with Fire Phoenix's Pianhua and Flying Snake's Cijio. Did you hear it from one of them?" "No wonder." Xingfu clapped his hands. "I was wondering why it sounded so familiar. I heard Pianhua and Cijio talking about him before. Is he acquainted with young Master Lung too?" "I wouldn't have noticed if you didn't mention it, but he seems to be acquainted with a lot of people." Fenuzwa was surprised. Silin wasn't the kind of person who would take the initiative to befriend people, and he wasn't exactly friendly either. However, he was acquainted with a lot of people. He had learned a few things about Silin from Lung. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to surprise anyone. "Then I'll have to meet him. It's not every day that I'm out here, so it's good to make some friends." Xingfu's depression from his constitution was mostly dispelled. "But I have to remind you that Silin is a member of Vanguard right now. I don't think Golden Beginning is on good terms with Vanguard, is it?" Fenuzwa asked. Xingfu didn't mind. "That's different. I'm here to meet Silin, not Vanguard. Plus, a newly formed squad isn't going to affect Vanguard as a whole, is it?" Fenuzwa thought. "I can't say for sure." Silin received a message from Cheto right after the deal was concluded. The man was indeed from Sector S, and his name was Xingfu. Xing? All 3 Zhen Xingming brothers had the word Xing in their names. Was it a coincidence? Cheto couldn't get his hands on Xingfu's DNA because the bodyguards were too well protected and cautious. While Silin was thinking of a way to get his hands on Xingfu's DNA as soon as possible, he turned around and saw Fenuzwa walking towards him with a smile on his face. Xingfu was with him. Fenuzwa and Xingfu walked over with their bodyguards behind them. The 11th Squad's members were all looking at them warily as they made their way over to the main hall. "Is that you, Silin?" Fenuzwa asked before he even got close to Cheto. The moment Fenuzwa said this, Silin knew that Fenuzwa definitely knew. Silin didn't bother to hide it either. He walked up to Fenuzwa and greeted him. "Long time no see, Fenuzwa. It really is you. What happened to you, kid? It's a long story. What are you doing here?" Silin asked. "I'm here to see if there are any tamed alien beasts I can bring over to the 11th Squad. I'm also here for a stroll," Fenuzwa replied. He was here mainly to keep Xingfu company. He could have just sent someone to do the job himself otherwise. Silin smiled and looked at Xingfu next to Fenuzwa. "Oh, allow me to introduce you. This is Xingfu." Fenuzwa didn't bother to introduce him. "Hello, nice to meet you. I've heard about you from Pianhua and Cijio," Xingfu said. Silin and Xingfu had become a lot more familiar with each other after Fenuzwa mentioned Pianhua and the flying snake Cijio. However, the bodyguards around Xingfu would raise their guard every time Silin tried to get close to Xingfu, and Xingfu didn't object to it at all. "All right, Silin. Why don't you contact young Master Lung right now? He's been looking for you. Funyuzwa had one of his subordinates bring him the communicator Lung had given him. The Andryara family had their own communication network, and this place was the Andryara family's property. It was just that not many people knew about it. When Lung received Funyuzwa's message, he was wearing his precious slippers and sleeping on a shell bed that was even bigger than the one Silin had seen before. I'll give you 10 seconds. Lung yawned without even opening his eyes. Young master, I'll let Silin talk to you directly. Fine, then tell him to fuck. Who did you say just now? Lung immediately sobered up, straightened his body, and rolled down from his bed of shells. Funyuzwa didn't answer. He passed the communicator to Silin so that Silin could talk to Lung. You sure have unique taste, Silin said while looking at the shell bed on the communicator. Lung crawled to his feet in a hurry. When he saw Silin on the communicator, his face twisted for a moment before he squeezed out a few words, fuck you. It's been a few years since we last met, and this is what you say? Why did you change your appearance again? Pretending to be dead again? This is my original appearance. I didn't pretend to be dead this time. I really had some business to attend to before I left. Now that I'm back, I've just established a new B Squadron, Vanguard's 11th B Squadron. You can invest a little when the time comes. Lung was silent for a few seconds before he said, I'll fuck you again. Behind Lung, the little old man Brzett reminded, Young master, please pay attention to your etiquette. When he heard Brzett's words, Lung paused for a moment before he abruptly ran towards the small study. After he entered, he pulled the door shut behind him and shut Brzett outside. That little old man is too annoying. Let's continue. After Silin chatted with Lung for a while, Lung said, Where's Wheeze, Silin? Call it over and talk to Lord Cat. I got a lot of good cat breeds this time. Let's see if there's any that Lord Cat likes. Silin. Lung wanted to talk to Wheeze, so Silin went to the grassland to look for Huimao. Huimao wasn't playing with Shueqiu and the others right now. We said it was sleepy just now, so it left, Shueqiu said. I'll go look for it. You guys keep playing. Don't scare those alien beasts too much. Why is that alien beast bald? Shueqiu, Miantuan, Chifeng, Moon and Sigma who came to play on a whim turned their heads away in unison and avoided answering. Never mind. Let them do whatever they want. Silin sensed Wheeze's general location for a moment, and Cheto sent him a message while he was walking in that direction. I've got his DNA, and it's just as you thought. They're related by blood, and if I'm not mistaken, they're grandfather and grandson, Cheto said. I knew it. Silin had been thinking about visiting Sector S to search for Jenya's logbook and the person Jenya mentioned, but he didn't expect to run into Xingfu here. Xingfu's full name was probably Zhen Xingfu. Xingfu also mentioned that he had a younger sister called Xingji. Perhaps only a few people would know the true meaning of Foggy's name. Cheto continued, however, there's something wrong with his DNA. Unlike a normal person's DNA, his DNA is too muted for too long. It's a flaw that makes him look thin and weak. Silin understood Xingfu's condition. The Zhen family's DNA was different from the others. Most of the Zhen family's DNA was muted, and the natural plant hormones extracted from the Fuji tree would cause their DNA to change. The Zhen family would inject a portion of the DNA into their DNA at birth, and then another half at adulthood to trigger a change in their DNA and remove the muted state. The DNA was unique to the Zhen family's DNA, and Jenya didn't have the time to inject the other half of the DNA into his body. That was why his DNA was so flawed and aged so quickly. Clearly, Xingfu was in the same situation. That being said, Xingfu didn't even inject the DNA when he was born. No wonder he looked thin and weak. Silin wondered how Xingfu's father, Jenya's son, was doing. Silin thought about how he should tell Xingfu about Jenya as he walked toward Huimao. On a grassy field not far away from where the alien beasts were kept, Huimao was lying on its side with its belly facing Silin. It was enjoying the warm sunlight and sleeping soundly, its paws still clutching a bag of fish biscuits. Huimao's ears twitched a little when he heard the familiar footsteps. Then he went back to sleep. Maybe it was because its consciousness had sensed Silin's approach, but Huimao rolled on its stomach and rubbed its body against the grass. Silin was just about to tell Hui Mao that Lung wanted to talk to him when he suddenly paused and looked at Hui Mao with a strange expression. "Wheeze, what's that behind you?" Chapter 329. Upon hearing Silin's words, the gray cat lazily half-opened its eyes and let out a slow yawn. "What did you say?" Silin pointed at Hui Mao's back. "What's that thing on your back?" "My back?" Hui Mao suddenly felt an itch on its back, so it cocked its head and raised one of its hind legs to scratch it. The moment it did, however, it realized something was wrong. Thus, on the vast grassland, the sound of a cat's meow suddenly spread out with a different tone. The tamed beasts that had just calmed down were thrown into chaos once more. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" Carrie and the others searched for Hui Mao everywhere they went. They were all very familiar with the cat's meow. Meanwhile, Xingfu's bodyguards quickly formed a defensive formation the moment the cat's meow rang out. It was a conditioned reflex. There were two gray things growing out of Hui Mao's back. He didn't know what they were, but when Hui Mao woke up, the two gray things slowly unfurled and grew wider and wider. Wings? Silin couldn't help but wonder. Who would have thought that the cat's words would come true? Silin stared at Hui Mao's round body. Can it really fly? The wings were shaped like wings, but they weren't made of feathers. Instead, they were made of the same ugly gray fur as Hui Mao's body. Hui Mao extended its wings a little more, so that it could wrap itself around its body several times. Hui Mao rubbed its wings with its paw and grinned like an idiot. It didn't even care about the bag of fish biscuits anymore. "How did you grow wings?" Silin asked. "I wanted them to grow, so I did." Hui Mao bounced around like it was showing off, flapping its new wings loudly. It didn't know why, but it kept dreaming of a pair of wings, and that's how it grew them. Hui Mao wondered when its next dream of eating fish biscuits from a starship would come true. "Fly around and get used to your new wings," Silin said. "All right." Hui Mao shook its feathers, raised its head, straightened its tail, and flapped its wings. "Shake again. Shake again." 2 minutes later, Silin looked at Hui Mao, whose forepaws were still on the ground, and could not help but say, "You're flapping your wings, not riding a bicycle. It would be strange if you could fly with your wings out of sync." In order to stop Hui Mao's uncoordinated vibrations, Silin squatted in front of Hui Mao and raised his hand. "Look at my hand. Flap your wings according to my gesture." Hui Mao also knew that he had to coordinate the two wings, but it wasn't easy to control them. It tried its best to make the two wings vibrate according to Silin's gestures. After a long time, the two wings were finally able to synchronize, and its plump body gradually left the ground. Meow meow meow. Silin couldn't help but give the gray cat a reminder when he saw that it was getting carried away while flying in irregular arcs. Focus! Hui Mao was indeed getting carried away. After flying in the air, it wanted to show off to Xueqiu and the others. Just as it was flying towards where Carrie and the others were, a gust of wind suddenly blew and disrupted Hui Mao's rhythm. Plus, it was not familiar with controlling its wings, so it fell from the sky and knocked out an exotic beast that was dozing off and could not dodge in time. The group of exotic beasts looked at their companion, who was lying on the ground for a long time, and immediately classified Hui Mao as highly dangerous. Therefore, as soon as they saw a suspicious figure in the air, the exotic beasts would run away as if they were avoiding their natural enemy. Fortunately, the place was big enough, or else they would be in trouble. What is that?" Carrie asked Yudi, dumbfounded, as he looked at the familiar-looking fellow that flew out from the chaotic group of exotic beasts. "It's a snore. Cats don't have wings, right?" "Normally, yes. But that fat cat doesn't belong to the normal category. TSK. Other people fly like eagles, but this one? From afar, I thought that it was a wild duck at first glance, but when I looked closer, oh my, it's a fat one." Carrie pointed at the gray cat flying leisurely in the air not far away and said with a smile, "I'm afraid we'll have a lot of trouble in the future." Yudi sighed. Carrie couldn't agree more. Since Hui Mao could fly now, Moon and Sigma flew up to play with Hui Mao and help Hui Mao familiarize itself with its wings. While watching Hui Mao, Moon, and Sigma fly in the air, Xueqiu squatted next to the fence and bit its paws. Tang Qiuqiu couldn't stand it anymore and tossed it a hoverboard. See? That cat doesn't have time to talk to you right now, Silin said to Lung on his communicator. Lung also saw the blurry figure in the sky and became excited when he learned that Hui Mao had just grown a pair of wings. Quick, call Grandpa Cat over. I've never seen a cat with wings before. Silin called Hui Mao over to greet Lung, and Hui Mao did come over. But after a brief greeting, he flew back to chase after the bird with Moon. They were obviously fast enough to catch up to the bird, but they just had to stay 10 centimeters behind it and scratch it with their claws from time to time, scaring the bird so much that it kept chirping away. Heh, it looks like the good breeds I got aren't going to work. Let me see if I can find a female cat with wings, Lung said in a serious tone. Are you free right now? You still have the time to care about something like this? Silin said. Of course not. Lai Long grumbled at the mention of this topic, but he glanced at where Silin was and winked at him. Let's talk somewhere else. This was the Andriera family's property after all, so it was easy for him to order people around. Lung asked someone to arrange a room for Silin. Whatever they were going to talk about was not to be leaked out. Xingfu made up his mind when he saw one of the managers respectfully ushering Silin into the building. It was obvious that Silin was much more important to Lung than Fen Yuzhua, so Xingfu was trying to figure out a way to build a good relationship with Silin. He didn't want to rely on his grandmother and aunt for protection, not to mention that his grandmother and aunt weren't in a good position right now. He shouldn't trouble them with everything, so he needed to establish his own network of connections. After Silin entered the room that was decorated to look like a study, he inspected his surroundings. The protection measures in this room were indeed very good. Silin, isn't the situation in the Hunter Alliance a little unstable right now? Lung asked. Yeah. The conflict between the four great forces is growing more and more intense, and Vanguard and Heaven's Birth are probably going to fight each other very soon. How are you guys doing? What else can we do in this situation? No one can rest easy. Lung's expression turned serious. Something happened in the army. Outsiders only know that the 8 marshals are in power, but there's one thing they haven't told anyone. Only 3 of the 4 Heavenly Edict generals are still alive. Silin was truly shocked. That was a Heavenly Edict warrior they were talking about. Setting aside the fact that they weren't surrounded by guards, they were incredibly strong themselves. Killing a Heavenly Edict warrior was no easy feat. For example, when Silin killed Osculos, it was all thanks to a combination of factors that Silin seized the opportunity to do so. Strictly speaking, Silin wasn't the only one who killed Osculos. Hui Mao and Cheto had contributed as well. Do you know who killed that Heavenly Edict warrior? Lung asked mysteriously. Si Huang. Who is Si Huang? Silin was puzzled. Oh, maybe you don't know this yet, but he's pretty low-key. Si Huang, it's Azrael's. Lung gave Cheto a thumbs up. That guy killed a Heavenly Edict warrior the moment he did. The balance in the army has been messed up a long time ago. The 8 marshals are in power, and the CI family and the U family are the strongest among them because they both have a Heavenly Edict warrior. As for the last Heavenly Edict warrior, he's keeping a low profile because no one from his family is among the 8 marshals. His actual military power isn't as strong as the 8 marshals, but he does have a lot of other non-military forces under his command. He's actively avoiding the CI and U families. He's a smart man. The CI family was CI Jincheng's family, and the U family was Yu Linglong's family. Be it the military, the government, the business world, or the academic world, these 2 families had powerful connections and networks. Add to that the fact that they had a Heavenly Edict warrior in their ranks, there was no doubt that they were powerful. The Heavenly Edict warrior's presence wasn't just because he was powerful, but also because of his connections and deterrence. This was the only way the Heavenly Edict warrior could gather more forces for their own use. It was no wonder that the 3rd Heavenly Edict warrior was avoiding them. Silin, the military and the government are now divided into 8 factions. The relationships between them are complicated, so you hunters shouldn't get involved. Even if others want to get involved, don't join them. They're just cannon fodder. The power of the army is far greater than people can imagine. This is what CI Jincheng and Knight told me as well. They told me to tell you in passing. I understand. I have a lot of things to do, and our new team doesn't have many members, so we'll do what we can. Lung and Silin's conversation only lasted for an hour, but the amount of information Silin had gathered was enough for him to investigate for a long time. There were some things that Silin wouldn't have access to in such a short period of time. As expected of the Andryra family, they had a lot of information at their fingertips. Silin believed that Ji Feng knew about these things as well, but Ji Feng wouldn't tell him. Ji Feng probably didn't think that Silin would learn these secrets from Lung either. Silin, be careful of the Yu family. Don't get involved. Yu Linglong might not attack you, but the rest of the Yu family might not. This was the last thing Lung said to Silin before he ended the call. Silin knew that there were many things that Lung hadn't told him, but he could guess a few things from what he said. What a chaotic era. After the call ended, Silin stayed in his room and pondered quietly for a moment, sorting out the information he had received. Azrael, Si Huang. As expected, they were both unfathomable people. Azrael's men didn't come looking for him, but Silin didn't think that Azrael's men and Gaydar didn't know about his return. They were probably preparing to deal with the League of Stars first before coming looking for Silin. They didn't think that Silin could do well in a foreign galaxy in just 2 to 3 years. Just as Silin thought, the reason Azrael's men didn't spread the news of Silin's return was because they wanted to deal with the League of Stars first. After Si Huang killed the Tianzhao warrior, Azrael had a lot of trouble to deal with. Every Tianzhao warrior was related to many people, and Azrael had to deal with these people first. Currently, Gaydar wasn't with Azrael's men. There was a rumor among the hunters that Gaydar would be the new solo hunter after Osculos, becoming one of the 6 stars of hunting. The military was a mess, but how much better were the hunters? When Silin went out, Hui Mao was holding a mole in his hands. When it saw Silin, Hui Mao flapped its wings and flew over. Now that Hui Mao was familiar with using its wings, its flight was a lot more stable. Based on Silin's understanding of Hui Mao, the cat was sometimes even better at playing dumb than Moon. No one would have guessed that the cat was actually listening to Silin Halong's secret conversation while it was flying. Are you done eavesdropping? Don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone. Silin looked at the gray cat. Whis tossed the listless animal to the side of the grassland. After the animal regained its freedom, it immediately changed its listless appearance and began to dig a hole with its claws. In the blink of an eye, it had burrowed into the ground and disappeared. Is there a lot of trouble here? But I don't think there's anything to worry about. Worst comes to worst, we can just bring our people to Master Second Grandpa. It was getting better and better at calling him Master Second Grandpa. Silin smiled but didn't say anything. It wasn't easy to run away from a giant whirlpool like this. But it was also an opportunity for the 11th squad to grow stronger. Heroes are born in troubled times, and I bet there would be a lot of good seedlings in this chaotic environment. Right now, Silin was looking at Xingfu's direction. It would be a lot easier to get to Sector S with Xingfu leading the way, and Silin would be able to find the notebook Genya mentioned as soon as possible. Then he could take it to the Queen. He would have a great help when the time came. Without the notebook as proof, Silin wasn't stupid enough to run to the Queen and say anything. After asking Xingfu about their next plans and learning that they were returning to Sector S soon, Silin expressed his desire to travel with them. He didn't go into detail about his true goal, and only said that he was going to meet a friend at Sector S. Xingfu was very welcoming of Silin's company. Now it was a 3-way trip. Silin, Xingfu, and Fenyuzwa. There were only a dozen or so Lan Hudi people who came to pick up Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail, but every one of them was an elite. When they learned that Silin's group had saved Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail, they thanked them sincerely. However, Hui Mao flew up to them right after they thanked them, and they looked like they had just drunk a bucket of bitter melon juice with chili. After the matter with Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail was taken care of, Silin, Xingfu, and the others departed for Sector S. On the starship, Silin, Shikai, Cheto, and the others were researching how to embed the AI into the starship. Carrie couldn't help them at all, so he stayed in the command room alone and munched on nuts. The door to the command room was open, and Carrie could see the few guys outside the door flying around the passageway playing games. Ever since Hui Mao grew wings, they had changed their playing field from the ground to the sky. Inside the starship's passageway were Hui Mao, Moon, Sigma, Xueqiu, and the Miantuan hopping between the four of them. These guys were always making a ruckus. Hui Mao generously took out his snakeskin ball. At first, Xueqiu and the Miantuan were a little afraid of the snakeskin ball, but they soon grew numb to it. One of their nerves was just too thick. For Hui Mao, the biggest advantage of growing wings was that it could eat while flying. Without wings, he would have to stop eating. He could only continue after he finished eating. But now, Hui Mao was flapping its wings and munching on a bag of dried fruits. Everywhere it flew, there were food crumbs on the floor. The more Carrie looked outside, the deeper his frown became. The bag of dried fruits Hui Mao was holding looked very familiar. Carrie crushed the bag in his hand. "You little bastards have raided my cabinet again." Xueqiu and the Miantuan heard Carrie's roar and ran away. Wheeze wasn't afraid of Carrie though. It leisurely flew to the door and cast a glance at Carrie. "There are only 7 bags of dried fruits and 3 cans of food. We haven't even pried open that big cabinet of yours yet. Also, the dried fruits don't taste good. Fish biscuits are better." "You think you're in the right?" Carrie looked at Hui Mao. "Don't go too far." Hui Mao ignored him and continued to gnaw on the dried fruits. It crunched loudly and the crumbs fell all over the floor. Carrie pointed at the crumbs on the floor. "Look at the crumbs on the floor. They're everywhere. Do you have any civility?" Hui Mao raised its fat paw and picked up a piece of dried fruit from the bag. "What is civility?" Carrie was speechless. Carrie grabbed a handful of nuts and threw them at Hui Mao. Hui Mao flapped its wings and did 2 backflips to dodge the hidden weapons thrown at it. It said to Carrie, "So lame. This cat could always move at a speed that didn't match its size." "I'm telling you, Hualu, don't be too proud of yourself as a cat." Hui Mao bared its fangs and flapped its wings. Before it could reply, Silin grabbed its wings and pulled it over like a chicken. Silin pointed at the food crumbs on the floor and said to Hui Mao, "I'll give you 3 hours to clean up the place where you dropped the crumbs." "Don't we have cleaning robots?" "The starship even has a self-cleaning system," Hui Mao retorted. "Then I'll deduct your cat food. You're on a diet anyway." Hui Mao's ears drooped. Carrie was just about to gloat when he noticed a notification on the monitor. "A starship is coming. They even have a Corvette. Which family's benefactor is this?" Carrie asked. The starship wasn't looking for Silin's group. Instead, it was looking for Xingfu and Fenyuzhua. Silin learned from Xingfu that it was the young master of the League of Stars, Pernius, who had over 80 contribution points. He was a media magnate in the media industry, Limitless, and Silin met him at a gathering in Lung. Fenyuzhua was also on the starship that Pernius had entered Xingfu with him. Xingfu was very happy to see Pernius. "What's the good stuff this time?" Pernius had a lot of video recordings of exciting games, and Xingfu liked them very much. Ever since he got to know Xingfu, Pernius would always show Xingfu and Fenyuzhua some of his favorite videos. This time was no different. Even Pernius couldn't sit still when he learned that Fenyuzhua and Xingfu had come to Hunting Planet together. He came to them with a video he just obtained. "It's the best this time. Super awesome." Pernius waved a small storage device in his hand. "Come on, let's go take a look." Xingfu hurriedly dragged Pernius and Fenyuzhua to the specially remodeled recording room. The bodyguards were used to this kind of thing by now, so they didn't mind it at all. If they pestered Xingfu too much, it would only anger him. Only 2 bodyguards followed them into the recording room and stood at the entrance. Due to his physical condition, Xingfu couldn't use a lot of powerful guns that required a lot of control, so he could only find comfort in the game. The bodyguards could understand. This video hasn't been released to the public yet. Even if it is, it'll cost a lot of money to watch. It's worth it. Pernius happily connected the storage device to the projector, and the entire recording room was instantly filled with the video of the battle. Xingfu stared longingly at the scene in front of him. He could almost feel the hard metal of the guns and the sparks that sprayed out of them. He could see many nimble figures dashing through the smoke-filled battlefield one after another. Explosions erupted one after the other. It looked as if he could touch it, but when he reached it, it was nothing more than an illusion. It was just like his own unattainable dream. Xingfu loved to stand in this kind of video. Even if he knew it was just an illusion and a screenshot of a battle, it was still an addictive and sad experience for him. Xingfu unwittingly became immersed in the scene as he stared at the video. No one else in the recording room noticed that Xingfu's pupils were acting strangely. The rate at which they contracted and expanded gradually synchronized with the flashes of fire in the video. Xingfu felt a sense of anxiety and frustration that he couldn't vent. It was as if something was stuck in his heart, and it was only growing stronger by the second. His dizziness grew stronger by the second, and the images of people running around and the flickering of the flames assaulted his optic nerves. Xingfu's breathing grew more and more ragged by the second. He felt as if he were trapped inside a box, and every breath he took would use up the limited amount of oxygen in his body. The alternating light and shadow in the video assaulted Xingfu's retina and stimulated his brain, disrupting his central nervous system and triggering a series of adverse reactions. To others, this might have been a spectacular and shocking battle. The beautiful video and the fact that it wasn't inferior to the battles of elites in real life was enough to excite any fan of the game. But to Xingfu, it was an unexpected killing tool. Sometimes, one didn't need a weapon to kill someone. A video was more than enough. The two bodyguards in front of the door were handpicked by the queen, and the more they looked at the video, the more uneasy they felt. "There's something wrong with the video. Turn it off," one of the bodyguards yelled. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Xingfu felt like he had reached his limit, but he still couldn't break free from that state. His legs finally gave out, and he collapsed to the ground. Chapter 330. Two bodyguards rushed forward and caught Xingfu before his head hit the ground. Meanwhile, a group of paramedics who had been notified by the two bodyguards rushed to the door and started treating Xingfu. The paramedics were equipped with a full set of emergency medical equipment, and almost all of them were tailored to Xingfu's constitution. It was obvious that Xingfu had experienced a lot of sickness and pain throughout his life. While the paramedics were treating the unconscious Xingfu on the floor, Xingfu's bodyguards had surrounded Phineas and his bodyguards. Dozens of guns and other hidden weapons were aimed at Phineas and his bodyguards. Even Finyuzwa wasn't spared from their assault. Both Phineas and Finyuzwa were stunned by Xingfu's sudden turn of events. They never imagined that someone would suffer such a thing while watching a video of a game fight. Even if someone did, they had only heard about it from the grapevine. At the very least, they hadn't seen it themselves, so they didn't even think about it. Or rather, they didn't think that Xingfu's constitution would be this weak. Finyuzwa and the others didn't know Xingfu's genotype rank, and Finyuzwa had always thought that Xingfu was a rank E genotype at the very least. Among the peers he had interacted with, there was not a single person in this generation whose genes were below E rank. Even if there were, it would have been due to a genetic defect at birth that was modified by surgery. Xingfu's type was completely out of Finyuzwa's expectations. Xingfu's genotype wasn't even rank E? Most people with rank G genotype didn't live this long, so it had to be rank F genotype. Finyuzwa didn't expect the grandson of the great queen of Sector S to be a half-crippled rank F genotype. To Finyuzwa, anyone below rank E genotype was half-crippled. Xingfu's bodyguards couldn't hold back their killing intent and attacked Finyuzwa, Phineas, and Finyuzwa. Their bodyguards wouldn't be able to protect them if a fight broke out, not to mention that they were on Xingfu's starship right now. There was no way they could fight back. How did this happen? How did this happen? Finyuzwa, what's wrong with Xingfu? Phineas was now panicking. Just now, the bodyguard had already said that there was something wrong with the video, but he still couldn't believe it. After all, he had seen the video more than once, and no less than 5 people in his family had seen it, but none of them had any problems. So why did this happen the moment they arrived here? The paramedics had already set up a barrier around Xingfu, isolating him from everyone else. Phineas, Finyuzwa, and the bodyguards couldn't see what was happening inside. "I really didn't mean to hurt him, it wasn't me. It really wasn't me." Right now, Punius was terrified. If something were to happen to Xingfu, then his family would suffer a huge blow even if they didn't suffer a complete defeat. He didn't think that his family could withstand the wrath of Jin beginning and the star rank hunter behind him alone. Moreover, in this chaotic environment, everyone was cooperating with each other. Being able to rope in a good helper would also allow one to have a better foothold. The Andrira family behind Lung, the Luxuries behind Fenyuzwa, the Golden Beginning behind Bliss, and the Star Hunter behind Bliss were all powerful helpers. But now, someone was scheming to destroy their partnership. Who could it be? Even if Xingfu managed to get out of this dangerous situation alive, a crack had already been drawn in their relationship. Fenyuzwa knew that Punius couldn't calm down right now, and neither could anyone else. After all, the most important person in the room was still being treated. Someone must be trying to use you to sow discord between us and Xingfu. Fenyuzwa's words were directed at Punius, but it was also directed at the bodyguards who were ready to turn them into sieves with their guns. Fenyuzwa didn't lower his voice at all, so everyone in the room heard him loud and clear. Of course I know. Do you think you'd still be alive and talking to me if you didn't? The person who spoke was one of the bodyguards who had been guarding the room just now. He was also the person who had been appointed by the queen to protect Xingfu all this time, Du Hong. Right now, Du Hong was both regretting and blaming himself for not noticing that there was something wrong with the video. He thought that something was wrong with the game, but he didn't stop it right away. He thought that it was a problem with the game's settings, but he didn't expect something like this to happen. Fenyuzwa grabbed Punius by the collar and tried to calm him down. Punius, think about it. Who gave you this video? Who edited it? And who are the players in the game? Punius wasn't an idiot, so he did his best to calm himself down and think about who was the most suspicious person in the game. Young Master Fu isn't in a good state. He's in a very bad state. Du Hong's heart sank when he heard the words coming out of his communicator. Someone who was in a very bad state had to have a 70 to 80% chance of dying. Du Hong really wanted to vent his anger right now. He wanted to punch the wall, but they didn't dare to do anything too drastic because they were in a quarantine room. They were afraid that it would affect Xingfu's treatment. It was also why Du Hong hadn't ordered Punius and Fenyuzwa to move immediately. Du Hong glared hatefully at Fenyuzwa and Punius, his killing intent causing Fenyuzwa to tremble uncontrollably. Fenyuzwa's bodyguards hurriedly stepped forward to block Du Hong's line of sight. While Du Hong was panicking, one of his subordinates came over to report that Vanguard 11 Squad was requesting a call. "We don't have time," Du Hong growled. But the captain of the 11th Squad, Silin, said that he might have a way. The bodyguards stammered before quickly explaining what had happened. They had rejected Vanguard 11 Squad's communication request earlier, but they quickly discovered that one of their external communication devices had been hacked. Silin's first words after learning that something had happened to Xingfu was enough to stop them from cutting off the communication device. "He has a way?" Du Hong frowned. He didn't trust Vanguard 11 Squad, but he immediately accepted the call and allowed Silin to come over when he heard that there was another patient in critical condition inside the quarantine room. Inside the 11th Squad's starship. "You've agreed." Hui Mao turned to look at Silin as he pushed the debris to the side. "Yes. I'll head over right away." Silin paused for a moment before turning to look at Hui Mao, who was staring at him pitifully. "Put away your wings if you want to go." Weeze's fully spread wings instantly shrank into nothingness. "Should we continue monitoring the other two starships?" Moon asked Silin. "Of course. Make sure not to leave any traces." "Got it." Silin had told Moon to keep an eye on Xingfu's condition from the very beginning. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been notified as soon as Xingfu was in trouble. Although he couldn't directly monitor Xingfu's condition, he was able to deduce what had happened based on the movements in other parts of the starship that weren't heavily guarded. Only Xingfu's condition would cause everyone on the starship to panic. Silin learned from Du Hong that Xingfu had fainted. Silin knew a thing or two about hypnosis, and from Du Hong's words, Silin was able to deduce that the recording was a very powerful hypnosis. "How is he now?" Silin asked Du Hong after arriving at the room. "Very bad. Tell me what you need to do." Silin shook his head. I want to check on him first. Impossible. Du Hong refused. No one was allowed to enter Xingfu's room while he was undergoing emergency treatment, not even Du Hong. The queen had specifically sent the paramedics to him, and they were under her direct command. Du Hong didn't have the authority to order them around, or else Xingfu wouldn't have been forced to drink a cup of warm tea without resistance. It was because the paramedics were always watching him. Hui Mao crouched on Silin's shoulder. The first thing he did when he arrived was look around the room. His gaze landed on a square table with some pastries and snacks on it. This was a place for entertainment, after all, and the pastries were for the people who came to the room. Seeing that Silin was going to talk to Du Hong, Hui Mao jumped down from Silin's shoulder and made a beeline for the table. Xingfu's bodyguards had been paying close attention to Silin the moment he walked into the room. They were on high alert. That was why everyone split their attention to keep an eye on Hui Mao the moment he jumped down from Silin's shoulder. What made people dumbfounded was that under the watchful eyes of so many people, in such a tense atmosphere, this guy could actually jump onto the square platform and eat as if nothing had happened. Du Hong pretended not to notice the fat cat's actions and continued chatting with Silin. Less than a minute later, however, another piece of news came out of the quarantine room. Du Hong's face paled, and Silin circled around Du Hong and headed for the quarantine room. This time, Du Hong didn't stop him. Du Hong contacted the people inside the quarantine room. Uncle Zhuo let him in. We can't let young Master Fu turn into a vegetable. One of the walls of the quarantine room opened up for Silin to enter. Du Hong followed him inside, while Hui Mao continued to eat on the table. Xingfu's medical team was very capable. If they hadn't treated him in time, he would have died a long time ago. It wasn't easy to keep Xingfu alive in such a state. Xingfu's condition wasn't looking good. His heart rate was erratic, sometimes as if he was in a hurry, sometimes as if he was taking a stroll. Moreover, his brain waves were very strange. Xingfu was still in a hypnotic state, and he seemed to be completely isolated from the outside world. No sound or movement could affect him, so he had to rely on himself to break free from the hypnosis. It was a very powerful hypnosis technique. What is that kid trying to do? Zhuo Xing, the person in charge of the medical team, was a middle-aged man. He was also Xingfu's doctor since he was born, and he was sent by the queen to watch over Xingfu. After checking Xingfu's condition, Silin looked around the 15-square-meter quarantine room and said to Zhuo Xing and Du Hong, I want everyone to leave except you two. There were 4 other members of the medical team in the quarantine room, and they looked at Zhuo Xing after hearing Silin's words. Zhuo Xing nodded at them, and they left. Silin made some adjustments to the equipment connected to Xingfu's body. Zhuo Xing was just about to yell at him when Silin took out a small bottle filled with a green liquid. As soon as he saw this small bottle, Zhuo Xing's words of reprimand disappeared without a trace. His face was filled with shock and disbelief. Chapter 331. Genya had given Silin the vial, and it contained a natural plant hormone extracted from the Fuji tree. Since this was the first time he was using it on Xingfu, Silin cut the dosage in half. After injecting the green liquid into Xingfu's body, Silin paid close attention to the various physiological indicators displayed on the device. Zhuo Xing and Du Hong were dumbfounded by what they saw, and the other didn't know how to react. What shocked Zhuo Xing the most was the pattern on the vial Silin had just taken out. He had seen that pattern before in the Queen's residence. The Queen treated anything with that pattern with great importance and forbade anyone from touching it. Zhuo Xing knew that the pattern was left behind by the Queen's husband, Xingfu's grandfather. Zhuo Xing had always thought that Xingfu's grandfather was no longer alive and that he wasn't anyone special. He had never heard of any great power or famous person in the League of Stars with the surname Zhen. But now, Silin had taken out something with that pattern on it. Du Hong noticed that Zhuo Xing was still in a daze, and he didn't stop Silin from messing around either. So, Du Hong poked Zhuo Xing with a finger. Zhuo Xing finally snapped out of his daze, but he didn't answer Du Hong's anxious gaze. He simply shook his head and motioned for Du Hong not to disturb him. Du Hong couldn't understand why Zhuo Xing, who had always been cautious and wouldn't easily allow others to interfere in his treatment, would allow Silin to run amok. Moreover, the thing that puzzled Du Hong the most was Zhuoxing's reaction just now. Du Hong had never seen Zhuoxing reveal such a shocked expression before. Perhaps it was because he was a doctor, but Zhuoxing had always been calm and collected. But when Silin took out that small bottle, he nearly lost his composure completely. Zhuoxing must know something he didn't. Just what kind of secret relationship did the Vanguard B Squadron commander, Silin, have with Golden Beginning? Before Zhuoxing and Du Hong could think too much into it, the device connected to Xingfu's body showed a huge change in the patient's condition. Both Zhuoxing and Du Hong's eyes widened when they saw one of the numbers on the device. The device showed that Xingfu's gene rank had changed from F to E, and it was even showing signs of evolving towards D. However, the evolution wasn't stable at all. The numbers were changing beyond the safe range. It wasn't a good sign. Normally, this phenomenon meant that there was a 60% chance that the evolution would fail for those who had been injected with genetic evolution medicine. The higher the number exceeded the safe range, the lower the success rate. Was Silin planning to upgrade Xingfu's gene rank before the treatment? Both Zhuoxing and Du Hong were thinking the same thing, but if something like this were to happen after the injection, then they had to stop the evolution process. The problem was that Silin had no intention of stopping it right now. Xingfu's body started spasming and his expression twisted. No one knew what he was thinking about that would trigger such a violent reaction. It was a tyrannical and almost irreversible hypnosis. This kind of hypnosis was very difficult to deal with. Xingfu might be able to deal with it if it were someone else, but not him. His body wouldn't be able to withstand the restorative treatment, and most of the drugs were highly resistant to it. It didn't matter how many factions were involved in this. One thing was for sure, the mastermind really wanted Xingfu's life. Du Hong had said that he would have to undergo forced treatment to save Xingfu's life, but it was very likely that the hypnotized Xingfu would turn him into an idiot. However, Silin believed that there was a high chance that Xingfu's brain would die even if he underwent forced treatment. Silin made some adjustments to the device connected to Xingfu's head. The device would generate bioelectricity to stimulate Xingfu's brain. Although the numbers displayed on the device seemed to be outside the safe range, they didn't reach the baseline of a life-threatening situation. However, Zhuoxing needed to consider the hypnosis technique. Regarding hypnosis, Zhuoxing didn't know much about it. That was why he couldn't make a proper analysis. Right now, Xingfu looked like a man who was having a nightmare. His face was filled with anxiety, fear, and even anger and disgust. Suddenly, Xingfu said something that sounded like he was talking in his sleep. However, neither Zhuoxing nor Du Hong understood what he was saying. They couldn't tell if he was speaking in a different language because of the illness. Silin understood. Xingfu said it in the imperial language of the Mist Bodhisattva Empire. What Xingfu said was, "I don't have a grandfather." Silin knew that Xingfu held a deep grudge against the queen. However, he didn't expect Zhenya to be the one Xingfu hated the most. It was because of Zhenya that Xingfu's genes were stuck at a level that could only be described as half-crippled. Moreover, the queen didn't allow them to undergo surgery to modify their genes, so they had no choice but to drag their bodies along until now. Silin had a feeling that Xingfu hated Zhenya. Otherwise, why would he say, "I don't have a grandfather," when he was hypnotized? He didn't know how Zhenya would react to that. The fact that Xingfu was able to say such a thing meant that he had broken through the absolute seal of the hypnosis. It was a benefit of his gene's evolution. "You hate him? Do you hate your grandfather?" Silin asked in the Mist Bodhisattva language. Zhuoxing and Du Hong stared at Silin without blinking. "Is he communicating with me?" Xingfu didn't respond to Silin's question, but his reaction was intense. It meant that Xingfu had not only broken through the absolute seal of the hypnosis, but also developed an external consciousness. "Do you hate him because he left you and your father with inferior genes?" Silin's voice turned slow and deep. He spoke at the perfect pitch so that Xingfu, who had developed an external consciousness, could hear him clearly without causing a negative reaction. "He didn't leave you with shackles. Your genes aren't inferior, they're not a burden, and they're not trash. They're just things that most people can't even dream of. It's just that they're sleeping right now, so you can't see what they're capable of. You've only experienced the pain of your genes for 20 years, but he's experienced it for decades. He's gone from the prime of his youth until his hair has turned white. His face is covered in wrinkles when his partner still looks young. Maybe that's why he chose to leave you and find a place to grow old in peace. He didn't want you to feel sad for him. I know that he regretted his decision later on. It's because he likes to draw 3 people, a couple, a child, and a couple. Then he would draw many more children behind the child, but none of them had faces. I once asked him why the children didn't draw their faces. He told me that he wanted to draw them, but he couldn't. Later on, he returned home, but he wasn't as happy as he looked. He liked to wake up early, eat breakfast, stretch out a little, and then lie down on the wooden rocking chair under the Fuji tree to stare blankly at the artificial sea. Sometimes, he would close his eyes and think about the people he couldn't let go of. It was a feeling of loss. Don't blame him. If he could, he'd like to be with you. Everyone thought he liked peace and quiet, but that wasn't the case. He wanted to be surrounded by his children and grandchildren. He wanted to watch them grow up, but he had his own difficulties. His siblings' children often visited him, but he always sat in a daze for a long time after each visit. He would sit alone on the rocking chair and stare at the sky through the leaves of the Fuji tree, enjoying the gentle breeze that carried away his melancholy. Maybe he's afraid now, too. If you don't believe me, you can ask him in person. I'm sure you'll meet him soon enough. Maybe one day he'll come for you with a huge fleet of starships. Every starship is bigger and more beautiful than this one. They'll even have a private army dressed in neat uniforms. They'll even have that leaf symbol you recognize on them. It was like a cool breeze on a hot, stifling summer afternoon. It blew away the irritating heat, but it didn't feel abrupt or violent at all. Xingfu's irritation and negative emotions gradually calmed down as Silin spoke. Zhuoxing knew that Silin's hypnotic voice wasn't the only thing that calmed Xingfu. It was the content of Silin's words that Silin calmed him down. Every son and grandchild of the queen had a personal physician, and Zhuoxing had been with Xingfu ever since he was born. That was why Zhuoxing knew a little of the language Xingfu was speaking, but he didn't understand it well enough to understand what they were saying. He didn't expect Silin to know about it. Zhuoxing and Du Hong really wanted to know what Silin was talking to Xingfu about. How in the world did he manage to calm Xingfu down and speak in such a strange language? What in the world was he talking about? Both Zhuoxing and Du Hong were conflicted. This young man was like a mystery. You thought you knew him well, but he could overturn your assumptions the very next moment. Zhuoxing and Du Hong's jaws nearly dropped to the floor when they saw Xingfu's childish smile. When they saw the gene rank on the machine, they felt like they were about to faint. On the instrument, the letter that was fluctuating unstably from T had turned into B at some point in time. But at this time, Silin had stopped the subsequent evolution of his genes. Silin's words had a hypnotic effect. It was a process that would guide Xingfu's consciousness and help him recover from the extreme state he was in. Combined with the medicine he injected, Xingfu's genes evolved smoothly. Silin knew that the Gen family's genes were special. They needed to stimulate their genes twice. If they only received the first injection and did not receive the second stimulation, their gene level would deteriorate and get worse. Only after the second injection would they be able to stabilize their genes. That was why every member of the Gen family who had undergone 2 genetic evolutions had genes equivalent to a rank in the League of Stars, or even higher. Aside from the Fuji tree extract, the other genetic evolutions used by the League of Stars were actually harmful to the Gen family's genes. This was probably why the Queen didn't allow them to undergo genetic surgery. The evolution of Xingfu's genes had increased his resistance by a lot, and it was far superior to his rank F genes. Therefore, it didn't take long for Xingfu to wake up after his genes stabilized at rank B and Silin stopped the evolution process. Du Hong wanted nothing more than to stick his head close to the machine and look at the data. After Xingfu woke up, he ignored Zhuoxing and Du Hong. Instead, he stared at Silin for a long time before he finally asked, "You're not my long-lost brother from the same father but from different mothers, are you?" Silin, Chapter 332. Even though the quarantine room hadn't been closed yet, the news that Xingfu was out of danger had already spread to the outside world. The atmosphere outside finally relaxed a lot after Xingfu woke up. Peneus was thinking about how he could salvage the relationship between the two sides after Xingfu came out of the quarantine room. After all, Peneus was one of the victims in this incident, but it was also an undeniable fact that Xingfu had almost lost his life. Peneus couldn't shirk the responsibility. Peneus hated the person who used him to the bone, and he couldn't help but feel uneasy if he couldn't find that person. He had a nagging feeling that he could be used again at any moment. He didn't want to experience something like that again. If Xingfu hadn't woken up this time, there was no telling if Peneus would have been able to leave the starship in one piece. Xingfu didn't leave the quarantine room immediately after Zhuoxing confirmed that Xingfu was as good as he could be. After sending Zhuoxing and Du Hong away, Xingfu asked Silin a lot of questions about Zhenya, but Silin only answered a few of them. He told Xingfu about his relationship with Zhenya, and that Zhenya couldn't come to see them for the time being. "When can he come to see us?" Xingfu asked. That was what Xingfu wanted to know the most. "We'll see. The situation in the League of Stars is very unstable right now. It's a mess, and if he comes, it'll only cause more chaos." Xingfu raised an eyebrow when he heard Silin's question. "Is the Zhen family you mentioned really that big of a family?" "It is. But I'm sorry, but I can't say too much right now. He'll explain everything to you when the time comes." Silin didn't want to talk about the mist Bodhisattva Empire at a time like this. Xingfu glanced at the device connected to his body. The gene rank displayed on it was enough to make him excited. At this moment, he felt as if he had endless energy and was very energetic. He was not as weak as before, where even the slightest movement would cause discomfort. From his conversation with Xingfu, Silin learned that his younger sister, Zhen Xingji, often followed his aunt, star rank hunter Prisa. His father had also been assisting the queen in managing Golden Beginnings affairs. Before Xingfu's genes evolved, Xingfu was the weakest among his siblings and father. His younger sister, Xingji, was slightly better off than him even though her genes were also rank F, otherwise, she wouldn't have been dragged around by Prisa. "When will my next injection be?" "That depends on your body's ability to adapt. If you adapt well, you'll be able to undergo the second injection very quickly. If you don't adapt well, you'll have to drag it out for a period of time. It might even take a few years or even decades." "All right, that will depend on my own ability. If I don't have that ability, even if I increase my gene level, it will be a waste." Xingfu had a clear understanding of his own abilities, and he was patient enough to deal with this problem. He wasn't the type to rush things. "What are you going to Sector S for this time?" "I can't say for sure in the outside world, but I'm sure I can help you in Sector S." Xingfu wasn't boasting. Right now, Sector S was controlled by the three great forces, and foreign forces couldn't interfere at all. Even if they were working together, there was no way they could openly enter Sector S. If Peneus, Fenyuzwa, and the others weren't accompanied by Xingfu, they would have been blown to smithereens the moment they entered Sector S. "I'm looking for something your grandfather left behind before he left. It might contain information about your father and grandmother." Silin didn't plan to hide it from Xingfu, and Silin was planning to borrow Xingfu's power to search for it. It would save him a lot of trouble. "I'll help you too. I don't have anything to do anyway. I was a coward before my genes evolved, but now I want to travel around. There are a lot of places in Sector S that I haven't been to before." Moreover, there were plenty of people in Fire Phoenix and Flying Snake who recognized Xingfu even if they weren't in Golden Beginnings territory. "All right, I'll meet the queen after I find it. Your grandfather left something for her and your father, and you can ask him for your gifts when you see him. He doesn't know about your existence yet, after all." Xingfu curled his lips and paused for a moment. Then he asked curiously, "What did my grandfather leave for my father and grandmother?" "You want to see it?" Under Xingfu's expectant gaze, Silin took out the badge. It was a royal badge that looked similar to the one Zhen Xingming's father wore. It was decorated with the unique patterns of the royal family's core bloodline. Xingfu stared at the badge for a long time and thought about many things. He could tell that the badge was unique from the rest of the world. He could sense its rarity and value even without touching it. It wasn't something that could be bought with money, and the materials were rare enough to make it. He left this to your father, Silin said. The reason he took it out was to reassure Xingfu and dispel the last bit of doubt in his mind. After observing it for a moment, Xingfu pointed at the patterns on the badge. This pattern is a little different from the ones I've seen before. This is a family badge that only members of the royal family or those who are very close to them can wear. It's different from the ones that normal people in the Gen family wear. The ones you've seen before only have the Gen family's crest on them, not this one. Xingfu exclaimed in realization. That means my cheap grandfather has a pretty high status in the Gen family. Silin nodded and put the badge away. It was best not to take out Genya's items before he handed them over to the rightful owner. Oh right, do you know who's trying to kill you? That hypnosis is very powerful. If it weren't for your special genes, you probably wouldn't have woken up, Silin asked. I don't know. Xingfu's eyes flashed with killing intent at the mention of this, but he managed to keep his cool. Maybe I didn't offend anyone. Maybe our cooperation made someone realize that we're in danger, and that's why they're trying to stop us. Silin nodded. Xingfu was a very rational person, and he looked at the problem objectively. Xingfu didn't tell anyone else apart from Zhuoxing and Du Hong that he had just recovered from a serious illness. Xingfu didn't tell anyone other than Zhuoxing and Du Hong that his genetic rank had increased. He told them to keep it a secret, not even to the queen. He would only tell the rest of his family after he found the thing Silin was talking about. He didn't want to spread the news until then. He didn't want anyone to think about it. Xingfu expressed that he didn't blame Phineas for his careful probing. He even comforted him for a while. Their cooperation wouldn't be affected by this matter, but they still needed to find the culprit as soon as possible. Fen Yuzhou felt that Xingfu had changed. He still looked sickly, but he didn't look as gloomy as before. In the past, Xingfu's eyes were filled with all kinds of negative emotions even when he smiled. Now, however, he looked a lot more cheerful. Silin asked Xingfu for a star map of Sector S. In the League of Stars, only the people who knew the star maps of their territories the best, and they were the only ones who could obtain the most accurate star maps. If it weren't for this incident, Silin wouldn't have been able to obtain a detailed star map from Xingfu to find his target planet. Ever since the chaos in the League of Stars began, Sector S's reshuffle had swept through the entire sector. Many outside forces tried to intervene, but none of them ended up well. Flying Snake, Fire Phoenix, and Golden Beginning worked together to clean up Sector S. Every prison in Sector S was destroyed in the process. Not a single prison from low to high was spared. In the process of the destruction of the prison, some planets were also destroyed in battles and shuffling battles. Then, new areas and new boundaries were divided. The new star maps were very different from the old ones. What Xingfu had was the current star map of Sector S, but he didn't have the old one. The new star maps undoubtedly increased the difficulty of Silin's search. Silin had no choice but to search for planets based on their approximate distribution and orbital estimates. At the same time, he borrowed some incomplete star maps from other people and pieced together some old star maps of Sector S. Then, with the fragmented star maps stored in his memory, Silin began his search. Silin stayed on Xingfu's starship. Xingfu prepared a lounge for Silin and provided him with all the necessary equipment. Silin also asked Moon and the others to find a way to collect some old star maps and sift through them. Huimao didn't return to the 11th squad while Silin was here, so he didn't have to clean up the mess on the ground. Moreover, Xingfu had his men prepare a lot of food for Huimao. Unlike before, Huimao didn't try to hide the fact that he could speak. Now that he had someone to rely on, he didn't have to worry about the League of Stars' strange scientists trying to capture him. In Huimao's own words, he would kill one if they came, and kill a group if they came. He had a helper. Since Xingfu couldn't get more information out of Silin, he decided to start with Huimao. He was very curious about the origin of Huimao's second grandpa's master, but Huimao kept his mouth shut despite his gluttonous nature. It was as if it had set up a program for itself. The moment it was about to say something, the program would remind it to shut up. This outcome was a huge blow to Xingfu. The fat cat might look stupid, but it hadn't told him anything of value, and yet it had unwittingly pulled them closer together. Xingfu attributed the food Hui Mao provided him to be the reason why Xingfu was so eager to get closer to him. If it wasn't for the food, the bastard probably wouldn't even have bothered to talk to him. After careful investigation and comparative analysis, Silin decided on a location. Most of the subdivisions around the planet had been preserved in their original state, and it wasn't a former prison. Speaking of which, Silin had been there before. When Silin Helong first came to Sector S, he rescued Flying Snake, Tsijiu and Tsijiu's 2 lieutenants, Snacko and Serpent. Then, he sent them to the planet Tsijiu mentioned. It was only after Silin had gone through thousands of selections and verifications that he had finally confirmed that it was indeed that planet. That planet had always been Flying Snake's territory. Maybe that was why Genya had left the items there, a place where Golden Beginning couldn't find them easily. It would seem that Golden Beginning wasn't completely unified back then. Now that the Flying Snake organization had grown stronger, Tsijiu's authority in Flying Snake had grown even stronger. Barring any accidents, it was only a matter of time before Tsijiu officially took over Flying Snake's authority. When Flying Snake became one of the 3 great forces of Sector S, the planet Silin settled on became Tsijiu's territory. The people in charge of the planet's defense had to be on high alert when the starships didn't belong to Flying Snake. However, when they saw Golden Beginning's emblem on Xingfu's starship, they immediately notified their superiors and had them negotiate with Xingfu. If you see any good seedlings, you can recruit them, Xingfu said to Silin with a smile while waiting for a reply. After all the prisons in Sector S were destroyed, every force tried to recruit a lot of people. If you think they're suitable, you can consider recruiting them. The people who came out of the prisons are all very strong. Of course, we'll do our best if we find any good ones. The planet responded very quickly, and the person who came to greet them was someone Silin knew. It was one of Tsijiu's followers, the strength-type Snacko. By the time Snacko was done talking to Xingfu, he learned that Xingfu was looking for someone on Sector S. Sector S wasn't exactly in a position to refuse. After all, they were partners now, and a 3-way alliance was the only way to stabilize Sector S. The starships docked at the spaceport outside of the planet, and Xingfu and his bodyguards boarded a spaceplane to enter the planet. Silin and his men followed suit. Snarker had already arrived at the designated landing spot to welcome Chigio. He had also assigned more people to guard the perimeter. He didn't want anything bad to happen to the young master of Golden Beginning. If that happened, he wouldn't be able to shirk his responsibility, and it might even affect Chigio's ability to take over Flying Snake. At first, Snacko's attention was focused on Xingfu, but when he saw the people who came with Xingfu, Snacko's face twitched. The cat looked very familiar, except that it was a size fatter than he remembered. That being said, it couldn't hide the dirty look in its eyes. Snacko had seen a lot of cats in his life, but none of them made him want to punch them in the face. However, Snacko noticed that the cat was sitting on the shoulder of someone he didn't know. Who was this person? Snacko didn't have much time to think about this right now. After exchanging a few pleasantries with Xingfu, he led them to a place to rest. Ever since Flying Snake became one of Sector S's 3 hegemons, a lot of magnificent buildings had been added to the planet. Snacko had arranged for them to stay at a high-class hotel. It was a special place that only the upper echelons of Flying Snake or some important guests would stay at. May I know who you're looking for, young Master Fu? Since we're on this planet, we should be able to help you and save you some time, Snacko said. The hidden meaning behind his words was, tell us who you are and we'll leave after we find you. Xingfu looked at Silin. Silin was the only one who knew the answer to this question. Before Silin could say anything, however, Hui Mao complained, why isn't there any dried fish? There aren't even fish biscuits here. Is this how you treat your savior? Snacko's expression stiffened. I knew it. He knew this cat was hard to please. Patiently ordering for some dried fish to be served, Snacko asked Hui Mao, where's Silin? Aren't you with him? Now that Snacko knew Lung's true identity, he understood that the young master of the Andryra family wouldn't hang out with a hunter very often. He probably had a lot of things on his hands right now, so he wouldn't have the time to visit Sector S. Hui Mao picked up a piece of dried fish and popped it into his mouth. He squinted his eyes and chewed for a while before he finally tilted his head and pointed at the person sitting next to him. "Isn't this the one? Your eyesight is terrible." After listening to Silin's explanation, Snacko finally confirmed that the person in front of him was Silin. Since Silin was here, Snacko had to report to Tsijiu no matter what. He was their savior after all, so he should at least greet him when they met again. Silin Helong was the one who helped them during their most dangerous time. Snacko had never forgotten this. As for the cat, well, never mind. Right now, Tsijiu was dealing with business on another planet. Now that his power had grown, he couldn't come over and talk to Silin face to face. After chatting for a while through video chat, Tsijiu asked Snacko to do his best to help Silin find the person he was looking for. Silin asked Snacko for a map of the planet, and Silin did a quick search based on Jenya's description. However, a lot of areas on the planet had been reorganized over the years, and the old areas had undergone major changes. Therefore, Silin asked for the old map again. Snacko wouldn't have given it to anyone else. After all, these things involved internal secrets. But since Tsijiu asked Snacko to do his best, and Silin had saved his life, Snacko gave him the old map without hesitation. Xingfu didn't express anything on the surface when he saw Snacko's reaction, but deep down he was shocked. Although Silin had told him about how he had saved Tsijiu and his two assistants, it seemed that there was more to it than that. Silin and Tsijiu were definitely working together. Otherwise, someone like Tsijiu wouldn't have asked Snacko to hand over a few maps that contained secret information and strategic arrangements. Silin pointed at one of the places and asked Snacko, "Are the residents still here?" Snacko looked at the place Silin was pointing at and shook his head regretfully. "This place was rebuilt a long time ago. I think it's been more than 20 years. I'll help you find out who you're looking for. I'll see if I can find out where they live now." "That works too." Silin turned off the map and said, "Help me find out who Hara is." Snacko's hand froze just as he was about to search for information. He turned to look at Silin and asked again, as if to confirm something, "Who are you looking for?" "Har." Silin enunciated each word clearly this time. However, Snacko and Xingfu both had a strange look on their faces when they heard the name. "Are you talking about that chubby guy who likes to laugh a lot and always rolls his tongue when he speaks, that Hara?" Snacko's eyes widened. Silin thought for a moment and confirmed that Jenya did describe that person. He nodded affirmatively and said, "Yes, I'm sure of it." Xingfu looked surprised. "Food King Hara has it?" Chapter 333. Food King Hara? The name made him sound like a glutton, and he really was a glutton, and a very meticulous one at that. "Is he very famous?" Silin asked. "Very." Snacko and Xingfu said in unison. "I really am ignorant and ill-informed." "No, you should know about this." Snacko took out a bag. It was the outer packaging of a compressed fruit biscuit, and there was a big smiley face logo on the bag. Silin recognized the smiley face. It was a very popular candy brand in the League of Stars, and Tang Qiuqiu had bought it before. However, Silin hadn't paid much attention to it until now. He did look it up once, and the only thing he learned was that it was produced by the Andryra family's factory. That was why Silin didn't pay much attention to it after that. The one food Silin paid the most attention to was fish biscuits. Hui Mao had grown pickier and pickier because he had to buy cat food often. As a result, Silin was far more familiar with fish biscuits than any other food. Unfortunately, the smiley face logo's factory didn't produce fish biscuits. The Andryra family's other factory didn't produce fish biscuits, and it wasn't this smiley face factory. Sector S had always kept a low profile, and the Andryra family and Hara had helped him a lot. As a result, the public didn't know about the Food King. It wasn't until the League of Stars fell into chaos that the name Food King gradually became known. Maybe a lot of people knew about the smiley face and the Food King, but only a handful of them had actually seen the Food King in person. There might be a few people in Sector S who had seen him, but there were very few outside of it. So you're saying that the owner of this smiley face logo is Food King Hara? I've always thought that it's a brand under the Andryra family. The Andryra family is only working with Food King Hara. Snacko showed Sillin some information about Food King Hara. Hara had always been interested in eating since he was young. To him, eating was a form of enjoyment. He had never received any higher education. He had started out as a waiter in a restaurant, and he had worked his way up from the bottom up. The most legendary thing about him was that he was originally a D-rank genotype, but he gradually became an A-rank genotype after eating so much. Eat to become an A-class. This was indeed not something an ordinary person could do. No wonder he was qualified to be called the Food King. Some people say that he can bestow a specific mood on a type of food. I don't know if that's true or not. After all, there are too few people who have eaten the food he personally made. But there must be a reason for all this. Even if the Food King isn't as godly as the legends say, he's not far from it. However, Food King rarely cooks for people to eat nowadays. Even my boss hasn't eaten it before. There was also a rumor that even Food King's own sons and grandsons might not be able to eat the food he personally made, but a little beggar on the side of the road might accidentally eat the food he made. Everything depended on the mood of Food King. That's why I say it's a rare blessing to be able to eat the Food King's food. Snacko said with a yearning look on his face. Xingfu calmly took a sip of his tea before answering, "I've eaten it before." Snacko and Sillin. Are you trying to show off your good fortune? Seeing that neither Snacko nor Sillin were saying anything, Xingfu continued, "I've eaten it more than once." Snacko really wanted to punch the man who was trying his best to maintain his composure, but couldn't hide the smug grin on his face. "Food King, you're truly deserving of your title," Xingfu exclaimed. "How do I contact Food King Hara?" Sillin asked. Snacko looked at Xingfu but didn't say anything. He really didn't know where the Food King lived. In fact, he didn't even know that he lived on this planet before. The Food King really was a mysterious person. All he knew was that he had an eccentric personality, and while he liked to smile, there were times when there was a dagger hidden behind his smile, and other times it was as warm as a spring breeze. He was a complicated person, or else he wouldn't have risen to his current status and influence. Xingfu shook his head. "I don't have his contact details, but I can ask my father. He knows." Xingfu's father, Zhenxing, was the closest person to Food King Hara in Golden Beginning, and Hara treated him very well. Xingfu and Xingji were given special treatment because of Zhenxing, or else they wouldn't have been able to eat the Food King's food so often. Xingfu contacted Zhenxing and asked for Hara's contact details, but Zhenxing wouldn't tell him. Xingfu spent almost an hour pestering Zhenxing, even resorting to acting pitiful and coquettish tactics that he hated the most, before he finally agreed to contact Hara. Of course, Zhenxing wouldn't give him Hara's contact details without Hara's permission. Otherwise, it would only bring trouble to Hara. The call was connected with multiple layers of encryption, meaning that Hara really didn't like to be disturbed. It also proved that Hara really did treat Zhenxing very well. After the video communication was transferred, a chubby smiling face appeared on the holographic screen. It was impossible to tell the man's age, but the skin on his face was very smooth. It was probably the result of eating too much. He looked very spirited. "Grandpa Food King," Xingfu called out to the person on the screen. It was mostly respectful. "What trouble have you run into, little Xingfu? Why are you calling me so urgently?" Hara asked with a kind smile. "I have a friend who wants to ask you something. It's urgent." Xingfu emphasized the word urgent to avoid Hara's reaction. But he didn't say anything because Snacko had shamelessly stayed at the side and said that he wanted to witness the Food King's glory. Hara didn't get angry. "Oh, who has something to ask me?" Xingfu gestured for Sillin to come over. "Hello, I'm Sillin." Sillin spoke to Hara on the screen. His tone was respectful, not cautious or fearful, but rather respectful, as if he was talking to a senior. Hala was impressed by this. "What do you want to ask me?" "I'm here to retrieve something he left with you." The smile on Hara's face froze for a moment before slowly fading away. Behind Silin, Snacko and Xingfu didn't even dare to breathe too loudly. They had never seen Hara without a smile before, and no one would ever use the word serious on him. It was something they couldn't even imagine. But now they had. Snacko had the urge to run away from this place. Even though it was just a video, the pressure he felt was enough to make him shiver all over. What is it? Food King Hara's tone was indifferent, but it made the atmosphere grow a lot colder. However, there was a hint of uncontrollable excitement in Hara's eyes. Even with his many years of experience, he still couldn't control the excitement in his eyes. It was obvious how much of an impact this matter had on him. A notebook. Food King Hara lowered his eyelids and sucked in a deep breath. Then he looked at Snarker and Silin and said, "The two of you leave. No one is allowed to enter this place until we're done talking." Snacko and Xingfu hurriedly opened the door and left as if they had just been granted amnesty. It was only after Snacko left the room that he realized that he was a member of Flying Snake, and he only listened to Tsijiu's orders. However, he had unknowingly obeyed Hara's orders without even the slightest hesitation. Is this the aura of the Food King? After Snacko and Xingfu left, Hara asked Silin in the Mist Bodhisattva language, "What happened to him?" Silin also answered in the Mist Bodhisattva language, "My master is doing very well." Hara was planning to probe Silin to see if he was lying, but Silin's answer caught him off guard. It was rare for the Food King to look surprised. Hara, who usually only wore a smile on his face today, was wearing a couple of expressions other than a smile. Hara couldn't be blamed for his surprise. After all, Genya was already like that when he left. Even after so many years, Hara had mentally prepared himself to hear news of Genya's death. He didn't expect Silin to say something like this. "He's doing very well, what do you mean?" "He's doing very well right now, but he can't come to see you. That's why he asked me to retrieve the notebook he left with you all those years ago. He said that I can find out what I want to know in that notebook." A minute of silence later, Hara asked, "Where are you right now?" Hara let out a chuckle when Silin told him the coordinates and the address. It almost looked like he was relieved. "What a coincidence. Come find me, I'm right here. Oh, and bring Xingfu with you as well." As he spoke, Hara took out a map and marked out their current location. The place Hara marked was exactly the area Genya had mentioned. It was the same area that had been renovated, but the buildings had changed a long time ago. Silin didn't expect Hara to still be there. Not even Snacko knew about it. Silin led Xingfu and Huimao to the place Hara pointed out. The renovated area was now a bustling food street. No one would have thought that the famous Food King would be hiding in this noisy street. There were tall buildings on both sides of the street. The lower floors of the buildings were filled with all kinds of snacks and restaurants, while the upper floors were occupied by residential areas. There was a very large restaurant on this food street with a big smiley face as its signboard. It was a famous brand both inside and outside of Sector S. Business was booming right now, and it had always been. When Silin and Xingfu arrived at the restaurant, there was already someone waiting for them in front of the entrance. The man led Silin and Xingfu to the top 3 floors of the building where the shop was located. It was where Hara lived. No one expected Hara to live here, and no one expected him to live with a bunch of normal people. Hara's status and wealth were more than enough to buy the entire building. The top 3 floors of the building were 3-in-1 duplex apartments. The door opened on its own when Silin and Xingfu arrived at the entrance. After Silin and Xingfu walked in, the door closed behind them again. Huimao couldn't help but stare at the delicious aroma of food as soon as he walked in. The decor inside the building was simple, and it wasn't luxurious at all. Instead, there were paintings hanging on the walls, and they smelled different flavors of sweetness. There were different kinds of sweet smells coming from the paintings. These paintings were all painted with sugar. Coming. Hara walked out of his bedroom. He was fat, but every step he took was steady. He didn't look clumsy because of his weight. "Hello." Silin and Xingfu greeted him. Hara walked up to Silin and examined him from head to toe. Then his gaze lingered on the curly leaf pattern on Silin's finger. "It really is him. That guy is really..." Hara was very excited. Is he really alive? He's alive. He's alive and well. Then why didn't he come back to visit us all these years? He didn't have to hide for so many years. Hara slapped the armrest of his chair twice in excitement. Hui Mao, who was pretending to steal food, jumped in fright and bristled like a cat on its tail. Sillin sighed. He forced himself to enter a deep hibernation, or he would have died prematurely. After he returned to his hometown, he received treatment and continued to live. That's true. Hara stood up and walked into his bedroom. When he came out, he was holding a small notebook in his hand. However, the notebook was locked. Hara pointed at the nearby study and said to Sillin, "Let's go there. Xingfu, come talk to me." Hara wasn't going to let Xingfu see the log, so Xingfu didn't follow Sillin into the room to see its contents. Sillin walked into the study while Hui Mao stayed outside. Hui Mao had grown a lot bolder after being caught stealing food from Hara, but he didn't get scolded. It was a perfect example of what it meant to take a mile when given an inch. Sillin looked at the notebook in his hand and pointed the leaf pattern at the lock. Click. The lock was removed and the notebook opened on its own. Genya had originally planned to keep this notebook as his personal journal, but he didn't expect it to be used like this. The video and Genya's notes recorded Genya's voyage route before he came to the League of Stars, and some of the things he did after he came to the League of Stars. Genya happened to be in Sector S when he first came to the League of Stars, and Angenia saved him not long after. It was Genya's luck. If he hadn't run into Angenia, his chances of survival would have been extremely low. Moreover, the League of Stars was a place where only the strong ruled, so the nobles of the Mist Bodhisattva Empire were basically blind. They didn't have a private army to protect them, and while they were strong enough to protect themselves against lower-rank people, they were nothing more than a weakling in the eyes of the hunters of the universe. As time went by, Genya and Annie gradually developed feelings for each other. There were a lot of people who didn't understand why someone as outstanding as Annie would fall for someone as mediocre as Genya, and they ridiculed him. When Genya first met Hara, he was still very young, barely an adult. At the time, Hara was just a waiter in a small restaurant on the food street. Later on, Hara got into an argument with the owner of the restaurant over food ingredients, resigned in anger, and was almost beaten to death by the restaurant owner's men. Genya was the one who saved him. Or more accurately, it was Genya who ordered his bodyguard to save Hara. Hara was the one who suggested Genya to open the Smiley Face restaurant in the first place. Genya even invested in it, or Hara wouldn't have been able to get the money to open it. In the video, two rather young people were smiling foolishly at a small shop. "Hara, I believe you'll be able to spread the joy of your food to everyone," the young Genya said. Of course. As the restaurant grew bigger and Hara became more and more famous, Angenia would come to eat Hara's food from time to time. Genya even taught Angenia and Hara the Mist Bodhisattva language. Genya called Angenia Annie. At that time, Annie was quite a dazzling figure. There were also some notes written by Genya at the bottom of the notebook. It could be seen that although Genya was very homesick at that time, his feelings of not being able to return home were comforted by the presence of his lover Annie and good friend Hara. Annie's brilliance only served to highlight Genya's mediocrity. Many people said that Genya was a shameless man who lived off a woman. Genya also knew that he didn't have the ability, wasn't smart enough, and wasn't ruthless enough. Even the only thing he had that was his background was nothing in the jail, and he had to keep it a secret. But for Annie's sake, he endured the ridicule and abuse. Later on, Annie gave birth to Genya's son, Xingfu's father, Gensheng. It was a very normal thing for others, but for Genya, it could only be described as having a son in his old age. This was because Genya's aging had accelerated at that time. He hadn't received the second injection when he was an adult. He had stayed in the Star Alliance for the past few decades. At that moment, his genes had deteriorated, making him appear old. Hara was still young, Angenia was still young, the bodyguards were still young, everyone was still young, but Genya was already old. Genya told Angenia about the Gen family's one-star rule, and that every fifth generation would have the word Xing in their name. Genya's grandchildren happened to be the fifth generation, So Ginshing's children should have the word Xing in their names as well. Silin had a feeling that Genya himself was afraid that Angenia might have forgotten the Gen family's rule, and that the word Xing would never appear in their names. It was obvious that Angenia hadn't forgotten the rule. In fact, she remembered it very clearly and followed it. The competition in Sector S was fiercer than many places outside of Sector S, and it was all about methods and ruthlessness. At the time, the ruler of Golden Beginning only had 2 daughters, and Angenia was raised to be the heir since she was young. At the time, Angenia hadn't officially ascended to the throne yet, and Golden Beginning wasn't as stable as it was today. Genshing alone was enough to distract Angenia, but Genya was also a burden. Genya didn't want to become a burden to Angenia. That was why he had been careful not to become a burden to Golden Beginning. He didn't want to become a burden to Angenia. He didn't want to become a burden to Golden Beginning. Based on Genya's mood notes alone, Silin could tell that Genya was filled with intense self-loathing at the time. Just like how Xingfu was filled with resentment earlier, their genes had determined their uniqueness. In Zhou, the Fuji royal family's Gen family didn't work, and Genya couldn't help them at all. The last image in the notebook was taken when Hara visited Genya. In the image, Genya was holding little Genshing in his arms, and their faces were leaning against each other intimately. Genshing's long eyelashes brushed past Genya's wrinkled face, and it was as if the warmth was tickling Genya's heart. Hara teased Genshing, "Give your daddy a kiss and I'll record it for you." Genshing seemed to understand Hara's words, and he moved closer to Genya with his toothless mouth and kissed Genya's face full of saliva. Genya smiled until his face was covered in wrinkles. After that, Hara made a milk cake that even the tiny Genshing could eat. It was called Butterfly's Kiss. At the end of the image, Genya wrote, "Butterfly's kiss is delicious. There's an indelible sense of happiness in it. It's a feeling that can never be erased. I think it's time for me to be content." On the last page of the notebook, Genya used a candy stick to draw some pictures of Genshing and Angenia. Silin closed the notebook and closed his eyes. He could feel Genya's sadness and helplessness. Genya couldn't be a hard-working father like Shusag, and he couldn't even protect himself in a place like Sector S. At the time, he couldn't even protect himself. The good news was that everything was over, and Genya would return. Silin thought that he could show Xingfu some of the things in the notebook and help him understand Genya better. But when Silin opened the door, his melancholy was instantly shattered. This cat is so embarrassing. Chapter 334. 1 hour ago, Hara was planning to chat with Xingfu after Silin entered his study, but he noticed the cat's furtive movements and asked, "What are you looking for, little fat cat?" "Of course I'm looking for food." Still, Hui Mao knew how to hide his true intentions. After scanning his surroundings for a moment, Hui Mao said in a self-righteous tone, "Of course I'm looking at your paintings. Your paintings aren't that great after all." Xingfu turned his head away. How could he say something like that? Xingfu didn't bother looking at Hara's expression. He was sitting next to Hara, and he could tell that Hara wasn't angry after hearing Xingfu's words, but there was something different about the easygoing attitude he used to have. He still cared. Hara raised an eyebrow a little, but the smile on his face didn't fade. "Oh!" Hui Mao raised his chin and pointed a paw at a painting hanging on the wall. "That one is terrible." Hara followed the cat's paw and looked at the painting. It was a painting he'd made on a whim when he went to the sea for a stroll. He'd used edible seaweed powder and various kinds of powdered sugar. The painting was of a blue ocean with waves crashing against each other. If one were to get close, they would be able to smell the sea breeze. It was refreshing but not fishy. There were a lot of different smells, but they weren't disgusting. Every visitor would be able to smell different scents and experience different emotions when they walked around the room, and the main reason for this effect was the paintings hanging on the wall. It was an art of combining scents. It might seem simple, but it was actually incredibly difficult. It was something Hara had always been proud of. "Then I'll have to trouble you to give me some pointers." Hara was still smiling as he removed the cover on the painting. Hui Mao wagged his tail and trotted over to the painting. Then he leaped up and nailed his paw to the wall. Perhaps it was because of his size, but Hui Mao slid down a little after he leaped onto the wall. Xingfu and Hara were just about to get up to catch him, but the cat quickly regained its footing and scuttled back up the wall. After circling the painting once, Hui Mao stuck out his tongue and licked it. Therefore, when Silin opened the door, he saw the holes made by the cat's claws on the wall. The cat licked the powdered sugar stuck to its fur and raised its paw to point at the painting that had been licked. It said in an authoritative tone, "Sea beasts look like this, meow." His words were filled with righteousness. On the painting that had been licked by Hui Mao, the powdered sugar had been licked away, revealing the dark background underneath. The shape formed by this dark background was exactly how Blue Skin looked when he swung his tail and swam upright. Probably no one would think that it was an overlord of the sea, but a seal for people's entertainment. Silin walked over and unscrewed the Hui Mao from the wall. He apologized to Hara. "I'm really sorry for the trouble." Hara chuckled and waved his hand. It's fine. That little seal sure knows how to lick." Hui Mao was licking his claws when Silin grabbed the back of his neck. When he heard Hara's words, he immediately bristled. "That's a sea beast. A sea beast. It's the overlord of the sea. Do you understand, fatty?" Xingfu lowered his head and pretended not to hear anything. There weren't many people in the League of Stars who dared to call Hara a fatty in front of his face. Silin pinched Weeze's toothy mouth and said to Hara, "It doesn't really know how to express itself, and it's terrible at drawing." That being said, Silin pointed at the image of a seal swimming upright with its tail wagging. That is indeed what a big sea beast did. "All right, let's not talk about this anymore. Have you looked through the contents of the notebook, Silin?" Hara asked. He didn't think much of the sea beast that Silin and Hui Mao were talking about. Silin nodded. "Yes, I have. I know a thing or two about my master's departure." Hara let out a long sigh and told Silin and Xingfu some things that weren't recorded in the notebook. Not long after the butterfly kiss, Genya left Sector S with Hara's help. Hara never made another butterfly kiss after that. Hara had always felt guilty towards Genshin because he was the one who made Genya leave Sector S, and Genya hated Hara a lot because of this. However, Hara would always make some food for Yuanxing's birthday, and he gave Xingfu and Xingji his own food for them when they were 10 years old. Xingfu realized that Hara was making food for them because of his father, Genshin. Hara probably wouldn't do it even if he was the queen's grandson. "Where's Genya now? Can't Genya and I bring him back?" Hara asked stubbornly. Silin thought for a moment before asking Hara, "Master hasn't told you about his family, has he?" He rarely mentions his family, not even in front of Genya. Master's background is actually much bigger than you can imagine. Even if the three great forces of Sector S were to join forces, they may not necessarily be able to beat the Gen family. You'll know when he comes back. Back in the Mist Bodhisattva Empire, Silin had seen the Gen family's private army. However, the three kings rarely mobilized their private army, so most people didn't know how powerful they were. That being said, there was no way a royal family would be weak. The problem was that the Gen family would definitely send a large number of their private army to accompany Genya, but they weren't sure if the space-time vortex could allow a large number of troops to pass through. Moon and Shirtang had been studying this problem for a long time, and they should be able to come to a conclusion soon. Hara decided to tag along when he learned that Silin was going to visit Genya and Genshin. He was planning to visit Genshin in the near future anyway. Hara also gave Silin a gift. It was a square box about 10 centimeters long, and there were a couple of pills inside it. They might look small, but they could save a person's life at a critical moment. It was a kind of handmade food made by Hara himself, and every single one of them contained the perfect amount of nutrients to support a person's energy needs for 3 to 5 days. It was a great item for a hunter who often traveled the universe. Plus, there was no way the Food King's food would be bad. Snarker was feeling incredibly complicated when he saw off Silin's group at the waterway entrance. He didn't expect to see Hara here. It would be impossible for the higher-ups of Flying Snake not to know about this, but the problem was that Tsujiu didn't. It looked like Tsujiu wasn't at the top of Flying Snake's management just yet. "We still need to work hard, everyone. Golden Beginnings headquarters. Genshin was busy dealing with some matters at hand. At the same time, he was wondering what Hara meant by that. Who was that young man that Food King treated him differently? His personal communicator rang while he was thinking. It was Xingfu. 2 minutes later, the bodyguard standing guard outside Genshin's room saw their usually calm boss run out of the room in a hurry, giving orders to his subordinates as he ran. It looked like he was going to pick up someone. Everyone in Golden Beginnings headquarters was in an uproar because the queen, who hadn't shown herself for a long time, had finally shown up. Moreover, both the queen and Genshin looked very excited. Apparently, the queen had been smiling a lot more recently than before. Everyone in Golden Beginnings headquarters was very curious. Just who was it that could cause these two to behave like this? It didn't take long for everyone to receive the news. Young Master Xingfu was coming back. The young masters of Luxurious and Limitless were also there to discuss the collaboration. Food King Hara was also coming with them. The people in Golden Beginning were much more familiar with Food King Hara, so they weren't too curious about him. After all, the queen and Genshin shouldn't be this excited just because of a few people, right? When the starships arrived, Queen Angenia and the current boss of Golden Beginning, Genshin, personally stood at the entrance to welcome them. The other spaceships that landed one after another didn't elicit much reaction from either of them, even though Xingfu and Food King Hara were among them. When the last aircraft landed, Angenia and Genshin had already walked over to it before it even landed. Everyone in Golden Beginning craned their necks to see just who it was that could make two of Golden Beginning's bosses personally welcome them. The aircraft did not seem to be anything special. The hatch opened, and under everyone's expectations, a gray cat jumped out. It stuck out its fat butt and stretched its body. After scanning its surroundings, it calmly squatted down and licked its paws. Everyone. It didn't take long for a group of people to walk out of the spaceship. Angenia and Genshin immediately went up to greet them. Sillin stared at the two people who were walking towards them with uncontrollable excitement. Angenia might have been arrogant and domineering when she was younger, but right now, even though she didn't look old on the surface, her mental state had grown to a whole new level. She might be smiling gently, but her aura was inviolable. Genshin, on the other hand, exuded the aura of a superior under Angenia's tutelage. It had nothing to do with his own strength. If there was anything strange about them, it would be their appearances. Genshin's sideburns had turned white, and Angenia looked more like brother and sister than mother and son. You're Genia's disciple, Sillin? Angenia asked in a trembling voice. It's a pleasure to meet you. Sillin saluted her. Angenia had seen this salutation before. Genya had taught her this before, and he said that it was a custom from his hometown. Angenia's gaze fell on Sillin's left thumb. The familiar curly leaf pattern on it brought tears to her eyes. Then, everyone saw their queen, holding a young man's hand with reddened eyes. No one knew what she was saying. So strange. Is he an illegitimate child? No, an illegitimate grandchild? But young Master Xingfu and Boss Genshin didn't seem angry at all. Seeing how excited Angenia was, Genshin reminded her, let's talk when we get back. That's right. You've come from afar, so we must treat you well. The queen ordered her subordinates to take care of the others while she led Sillin into her private car. Huimao followed suit. Sillin felt goosebumps rising all over his body when he heard the way he called her second grandma and mistress. Genshin also got into Angenia's car. As for the others, they didn't look like they were going to take care of them themselves. Xingfu scratched his head awkwardly as he watched the flying car fly away. Seriously, their own son and grandson were here, but the two of them actually ignored them. After saying goodbye to Fenyuzwa and Pernius, Xingfu had someone drive him to catch up to them. Hara was used to this kind of cold treatment, and he could understand Angenia and Genshin's feelings. So he didn't mind it at all. Instead, he greeted some of Golden Beginning's acquaintances with a smile. Back at Angenia's residence, Sillin took out the necklace and badge and handed them to Angenia and Genshin. My master told me to give these to you. Genshin accepted the badge. It didn't have any buttons or pins, but it stuck to his clothes. If it came into direct contact with his skin, it would turn into a curly leaf pattern that looked like a tattoo. Engenia, on the other hand, stared at the necklace in her hand in a daze. Afterward, Sillin injected Genshin with the plant hormone extracted from the Fuji tree. He also told Genshin and Engenia a few things to take note of before leaving the rest for them. Xingji wasn't here right now, so Engenia would be the one to administer the injection. Genshin's genetic evolution process was a lot calmer than Xingfu's. Xingfu's reaction was a little bigger than Xingfu's, because he was a little special at the time. After the stimulated evolution, Genshin's gene rank remained at rank B, but his appearance had changed a lot. Before this, Genshin was a middle-aged man with graying temples, but after the injection, he had become a young man in his prime. Genshin was very happy about this change. After all, the boss of Golden Beginning couldn't be too weak. Previously, many people had objected to Genshin taking over because he was too weak. After this, he believed that those people would calm down a little. Engenia was a little disappointed that Genya couldn't come back, but it was great news to know that he was alive and doing very well. Engenia felt a lot of the frustration that had been plaguing her for decades. "Oh right, Sillin, you're the captain of Vanguard now, right? I have a gift for you. I believe it will be of great help to you." Engenia summoned one of her subordinates and told them to bring the gift over. "Are you talking about that armor?" Genshin looked at Engenia. They only had 5 sets of that armor in their possession right now. He, Engenia, Xingfu, Xingji, and Prisa each had a set. How could they possibly have an extra? Unless Engenia wanted to give Sillin her own or Xingfu's. Xingfu hadn't used the armor yet because his constitution was too weak to handle it before. But now that Xingfu's genes had improved, armor? Sillin was curious. He had seen protective suits and armor that could be used in outer space, but if both Engenia and Genshin thought so highly of it, there had to be something special about it. A moment later, Engenia's subordinate returned with a box. Engenia took out a strange garment that seemed to be made of a transparent liquid that was connected to a pair of pants. "We only received 5 sets, and this is mine. I'm giving it to you now." Just as Sillin was about to refuse, Engenia stopped Sillin and looked at Genshin. "Little Sheng, show me." Genshin rose to his feet and took off his jacket. Then, Sillin watched as a transparent liquid suit similar to the one in Engenia's hand appeared on the surface of Genshin's body. The liquid then solidified and enveloped Genshin in a suit of silvery white armor. He was fully armed from head to toe. Genshin took out a laser knife and slashed at the armor's arm, but it didn't leave a single mark. The curve of the armor was natural when it ran and jumped. Once the demonstration was over, the helmet on the head of the armor was removed to reveal Genshin's face. Genshin looked very excited. After all, the armor felt much better after his genes evolved. This armor can be used in outer space. I'm sure you'll discover its other benefits after you try it out. Also, after you put it on, it can connect with your nerves, and you can control its form. You can hide inside your body or appear as armor. Engenia handed the armor to Sillin. Sillin took the armor and looked at it carefully. It was indeed very special. When he touched it, he felt like he could communicate with it. The person who made this armor was quite amazing. However, when Sillin observed the armor, he noticed an inconspicuous print on it. "This print, you recognize this print?" Engenia was very observant. "Yes. It's a pity." After a pause, Sillin suddenly asked, "Do you have a member of this family here?" Engenia hesitated for a moment, but she still nodded. "Can I go see him?" Sillin asked. Genshin opened his mouth, but didn't say anything. He would let Engenia decide. After a moment of silence, Engenia replied, "Sure. I'll take you there now." "Right here? That's great. We can solve this problem together." Sillin thinks. He put away the armor and followed Engenia out. Genshin followed closely behind. He also wanted to know what Sillin knew. There was a courtyard not far from Engenia's residence. The courtyard was surrounded by some strange machines. When Sillin arrived, Hara's loud laughter came from the courtyard. Engenia opened the door, and Sillin saw the person inside. Hara was decorating a cake with fruits. Opposite Hara was a young man about 14 or 15 years old. He was holding his chin with one hand and dipping some cream from the unfinished cake into his mouth with the other. His eyes were curved in a smile. Hearing the sound of the courtyard door opening, the young man looked over. Facing the shining sunlight, Sillin saw the silvery white color reflected in his metallic gray pupils. The pure metallic gray pupils and the reflection of the silver light. You had told Sillin that the young man in front of him was a pure-blooded member of the Shi family. However, this youth's hair was white instead of the metallic gray that you had said most members of the Shi clan possessed. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.